Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Podcast of Storm, a social awkward outcast, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convening to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the authenticator, Dalton L. Morton.
Hello, folks. We are almost mercifully out of September and, more importantly, into the October country. Hooray!
And I am your host last time, more wannabe, the brains for pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
Wake me up when September ends.
Right, and I do want to apologize for being a few minutes late simply because I had forgotten to uh, put the link in the Discord, and that is fully on me. So yeah,
And then we had an
yeah,
entire side conversation because my brain suddenly turned the phrase "put the link in the Discord" into the tune of "Put the lime in the coconut," and Brainstorm apparently had never heard the "Lime in the Coconut" song. So that was a whole thing. Would probably cost us about a minute and a half.
yeah. It's gonna be our last week of September, and then we're gonna have things. We're starting to have things set up for this for October. It's taking us some time, so uh, yeah, so yeah.
Terror time again. Sorry. One more week. One more week is all it will take, and then it will be October again, and then I can be happy. Yay.
So yeah, so we are going to
September
try.
was an entire clusterfuck, and I'm glad it's almost over.
Yeah, I'm starting to agree with you on the whole 18 dead zone for like.
Well, apart from it even being a dead zone, I was all excited because as of the 2nd and 3rd of this month, I was supposed to be going to Ren Fair and having a good old time. And I had a reasonably decent time, except for my scooter broke down, and then we had to deal with that. And then in the process of trying to find a wheelchair to substitute for the scooter, for the rest of the weekend, we got in a car wreck. And pretty much ever since then, everything that should be good or fun in September has turned into shit and or difficulty. So yeah, I'm happy to see the end of September and the beginning of October because it's just I need September to be over and I need October to once more be creepy and spooky and fun and wintry, please.
Yeah, so this is from a article we started last week, and you go check that one out on a podcast of Storm number 233. Um, and we're going to
We
try
are
and
slowly getting up
continue it.
there.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to finish it this week or not. That wholly depends on us. So,
Yeah, it's probably going to be one of those multi-part sectionals there.
yeah. So this is from originally from the Vulture.com. Um, hold on. But yeah, on, hold on. Let me. Rotten Tomatoes still has Hollywood in its grip.
I
Uh,
can't really argue with them there. It does. It shouldn't, but it does.
yeah,
Although I think entirely to be fair, it's also fair to say that Hollywood has Rotten Tomatoes in its script as well, because all this editing out, um, all this editing out, review bombing, quote unquote, wouldn't be happening if the studios didn't pressure Rotten Tomatoes to censor and regulate their system. So
yeah,
there's that.
uh, there we go. There we go. Okay. I forgot I had it on full screen.
Hmm.
All right. There we go. So yeah. I don't know. Shoot. So we just start where we left off and just go from there. 'Cause I don't. I feel like I'd have to backtrack a lot to so we'd have more stuff.
Yeah, let's just continue from where we left off and let the ships go where they may.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Granted, this is not rocket science or even particularly new, but the strategy can be surprisingly effective on tentpole releases, for which studios can leverage the growing universe of fan-run websites, which critics are generally more admiring of comic book movies than those who write for mainstream outlets, also comicbookmovie.com. Uh, for example, in February, the Tomatometer score for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania debuted at 79% based on its first batch. Days later, after more critics had weighed in, its rating sank into the 40s. But the gambit may have worked. Quantumania had the best opening weekend of any movie in the Ant-Man series at $106 million. In its second weekend with its run is more firmly established, the film grosses slid 59%, the steepest
I
drop-off
think
in Marvel history. Okay, okay.
I think it's a little bit disingenuous to chalk all of that up to the reviews and only the reviews. Because see, the reason why it had the largest weekend of any Ant-Man movie as yet is because whether you like it or not, Ant-Man has mostly been an also ran most of the time. Like he's there kind of on in the sides on the fringes, but he's one of the second or third stringers. Whereas Ant-Man Quantumania #1 was the third in a trilogy, and the third in the trilogy is always the biggest. 2 was the start of Phase 5 and the transition from Phase 4 into Phase 5, which in and of itself was a big deal. And 3, much like Guardians 1, it gave people a lot more insight into the big bad of the next couple phases, namely Kang. These are the reasons why it overperformed for the Ant-Man franchise, and consequently also the reasons why it drastically underperformed in its second, third, and fourth weekends has very little to do with the reviews either, and more to do with a couple things. One, despite having a more serious tone in the trailers, it didn't actually have that much more of a serious tone in the actual movie. Two, the visuals and CGI looked like ass throughout large quantities of that movie, and large quantities of that movie needed to be CG because one of the it was the first Ant-Man movie to take place majoritarily off of Earth or Earth-like planets. And of course, three, because despite the fact that it was sold as this big serious launch to Phase 5, it left a lot to be desired. In fact, it performed a lot more like um a standard Ant-Man movie, with the exception of the CGI looked like ass, and it didn't live up to the serious tone of the trailers. That being the case, it underperformed comparatively. Also, it must be said, people are pissed or were pissed off with Phase 4. They were willing to give Phase 5 a chance, and then Phase 5 proved to also at least be starting from a disappointing note. These are the reasons why Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania overperformed in its first weekend and massively underperformed in its second, third, and fourth, etc. weekends. It had nothing to do with the reviews and everything to do with people's own organic reactions to the movie, more or less. Moving on.
Right. Okay. In Studio's defense, Rotten Tomatoes' hastiness in computing its scores has made it practically necessary to keep Cork One back. In a strategic blunder in May, Disney held the first screening of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny at Cannes. Cannes or Cannes?
Can.
Cannes. The world's moodiest film festival, from which the first 12 reviews got an initial score of 23%. What they should have done, says publishers number one, was have simultaneous screenings in the States for critics who might have been more friendly. A month and a half later, Dial of Destiny bombed at the box office, even though friendly critics eventually lifted its rating to 59%. They had a low
Again,
hold on.
Go ahead. Finish the thing.
They had a low Rotten Tomatoes score just sitting out there for 6 weeks before release, and that was it.
I still think you're being disingenuous for overemphasizing the role of reviews in such things. The Indiana Jones 5 didn't do well. 1, because Indiana Jones 4 was a catastrophic failure for the ages, and everyone knew it was a catastrophic failure for the ages. 3, or 2, Indiana Jones or Harrison Ford looked old even in Indiana Jones 4, and that was in 2006, I believe, was when Indy 4 came out. So that being the case, he was in his, I want to say, late 60s in 2006. He is now in his late 80s. Are you honestly telling me that that had nothing to do with anything? And of course, number 3, much like many modern sequels and remakes, instead of focusing primarily on the hero of the movie, it focused primarily on a self-insert for the writers or the studios, namely Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Helena character. And given that Mutt, the previously established surrogate for Indiana Jones, was played by Shia LaBeouf, and we didn't like him then, it's highly unlikely that Indy 5 was ever going to do well, because the trailers did not disabuse anyone of the notion that it was going to be at least as bad as Indy 4, if not worse. And of course, again, Harrison Ford's is no longer an action star in this day and age, and he can't really pull off the nobody style "I'm old but I could still kick your ass" thing very easily. Moving on.
Right. For smaller movies, the opposite is more common at film festivals, where critics tend to get swept in the glamour, or maybe just the jet lag, and give kinder reviews than their peers back home. It happens all the time, says the indie distribution exec. A movie will come out of a festival with a 90 plus Rotten Tomatoes score, then boom, when it hits the marketplace, it goes down to 60%. At the Venice Film Festival last September, critics raved about The Whale from Brendan Fraser and Netflix's Marilyn Monroe biopic Blonde, saying the two films' tomato scores to 84 and 86%, respectively. Later, back on Dryland, sanity prevailed, so as other critics downgraded those to 54 and 42.
Again, I think you're way overestimating the importance of reviewers in this dynamic here. Yes, negative reviews can certainly tank a movie, but here's an interesting thing. If the audience doesn't trust the reviewers, a negative review can actually have the opposite effect. Because if the audience at large suspects the critical class of being a bunch of aristocratic toffs and hating on a movie for irrational or stupid reasons. They will actually lionize around the movie. Look at Joker. Look at the Super Mario Brothers movie, etc. Look at to some degree Top Gun Maverick. Although I want to say the critics were on board with that one as well as the audience was. But point being, the critics, while negative reviews can hurt a movie, they can only hurt a movie insofar as the audience actually finds the critics' reasons behind their negative reviews to be reliable. If we suspect the critics of being a bunch of aristocratic art house snobs and poo-pooing movies for no good reason, again, see Joker and or the Super Mario Brothers movie and or the Sonic movie, then a negative clusterfuck of reviews will only have the opposite impact. Because when the critics are out of touch aristocratic snobs, people line up, if for no other reason than to tell the critics to go fuck themselves and stop being such toffs. But trust me, Indy 5 was going to get a negative audience review come hell or high water just based on the content of the movie, even if the critics had all creamed themselves over it. In fact, had the critics creamed themselves over it, it probably would have just resulted in people having less and less respect for the critics. The critics' authority only lasts as long as the audience actually trusts the critic. If the critics are untrustworthy or up their own ass or in their own bubble to the point that they can't be trusted to be a barometer of quality anymore, they will either be ignored or, more often, they will be spited, just like the critics very often go out of their way to spite anything they think the lowest common denominator will ever enjoy. See, that's the thing. This whole spiteful relationship that critics and fans have isn't a one-way street. Very often, yes, fans will have spite for the critics, but usually that's because the critics in fact strike first and have contempt for fans or even just a simple category of enjoyment. If they don't find enough thematic bullshit to cream themselves over, they will poo-poo a movie not because it's not good, but because they don't find it to be morally or intellectually sustainable, rather than focusing on the only thing people care about, which is whether the movie is any good or entertaining in any way. Moving on.
Naturally, studios have learned to exploit this dynamic. Hostess number one is working on a 2022 title that premiered to acclaim at a festival a few months before its release. I wanted to screen it more widely, but the movie had 100, and the studio didn't want to damage that because they wanted to use the 100% graphic in their marketing. I said, why don't we get a couple more reviews? And they were like, we just want the 100. The film won an Oscar.
What film won an Oscar? I didn't catch that part.
It doesn't say.
Okay, so it wasn't the factor of me paying attention that it was the article didn't actually.
Okay, they're referencing people as by a name, published as number one, number two, number three. So I think not mentioning the protect the identity of that publisher.
Okay. Moving forward.
Okay, I wouldn't put anything to say.
Well, I have one thing to say, which is critics need to get it through their heads that audiences don't care about all this thematic and or sociopolitical bullshit. So even if a movie has 100% Rotten Tomatoes score among the critics, that doesn't necessarily mean the audiences have any obligation to give a fuck about it. Just like if a movie wins a bunches of Oscars, that doesn't mean the audience has any obligation to give a fuck about it, because the Oscars authority used to be based on quality, but now it is mostly based on art house consensus rather than quality, and people don't give a fuck about art. artistic or art house consensus, simply put.
Yeah,
I.e.,
and
since the Oscars are no longer a good barometer of quality, and good reviews are very often not an actual barometer of quality, the audience will just cease to give a fuck about them.
I also think it's incredibly stupid not to have the public vote which one, you know,
I I mean that is also it wouldn't be a problem if it were just if it weren't for the fact that, like I say, the critical and like artistic class views themselves as a class. They view themselves like an aristocracy. If critics could actually understand what the fuck audiences want and not have derisive contempt for it, they could actually nominate things that people actually like. But in the modern world, it very often seems like the Oscars go out of their way to nominate everything but things people actually like. Because for some reason, the audience actually liking it is a point in its disfavor somehow.
I I still think the Oscars should be up to public vote than anything else.
I mean, this that could also be a solution. I'm just saying, I would much rather a world where critics could be trusted to actually understand what people want, rather than turning the Oscars into the People Choice Awards. If the critics actually did their jobs and represented the general opinions of the audience, then we wouldn't need to make the Oscars into the People Choice Awards. They could actually be expected to give Oscars to things people liked. But as long as the critics and the people making movies see themselves as a kind of aristocracy, and the plebs and the audiences as some kind of untermenschen, um, yeah, no, the Oscars will become more and more irrelevant, because if you don't actually give the award for best movie to the movies people like the most, what good are you?
You know,
Yeah, moving on.
uh, all this would be one thing if Rotten Tomatoes were merely an image from Wedge 1.0 being preyed upon by Hollywood sharks. But the site has come a long way from its founding. In 1998, by UC Berkeley grads, one of whom wanted a place to catalog reviews of Jackie Chan movies. Rotten Tomatoes outlasted the dot-com bubble and was passed from one buyer to another, most recently in 2016. That year, Warner Brothers sold most of it to Fandango, which shares a parent company with Universal Pictures. If it sounds like a conflict of interest for a movie review aggregator, be owned by two companies that make movies and another that sells tickets to them, it probably is.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is stupid to have Rotten Tomatoes literally owned by a movie company, because, well, if Fandango is owned by Universal and Fandango owns Rotten Tomatoes, then at the very least you have to question whether any Universal movie is getting a decent review, or whether they're being softballed, as it were. Although, in fairness, in Rotten Tomatoes' case, it's not actually usually Universal that gets the special treatment. It's usually Warner Brothers and or Disney that get the special treatment, which is in and of itself kind of funny.
I don't know.
Moving on.
Oh, okay. For the acquisition, Fandango had its own five-star rating scale on its app and website, under which it was almost impossible for a movie to receive fewer than 3 stars. Since then, even the ostensibly well-intentioned changes that have made to Rotten Tomatoes have seemed to produce score-boosting side effects. Do you
I
want me to
don't
keep
really
reading
have it.
or
Yeah, I
okay?
don't really have anything to add there. So moving on.
Rotten Tomatoes allows users to rate movies alongside critics in 3 years. After the Sundance ordeal, it changed the way these audience scores are calculated. Misogynist trolls have hijacked the platform, coordinating to tank women-led movies like Captain Marvel before they open.
Mm. Okay. I'm going to say this very, very clearly and very, very slowly so everyone can understand what I am trying to say. Feminism is not women. Social justice is not the only ideology capable of speaking of or for or with minorities. It is not women-led things people don't like. It is ideologically feminist things, especially the intersectional social justice kind, that people don't like. And two, there is absolutely no way that you can know people's motives for leaving negative reviews apart from the possibility that they saw and do not like the movie. Also, even if they did have morally invalid reasons for doing a thing, as long as they're being honest and not overrepresenting their opinion by faking accounts or using bots or whatever, you cannot say that their opinion doesn't matter. And of course, four, are we never going to address the fact that sometimes critics will get together and purposefully dump on a movie? Because they are also out of touch and ideologically motivated cunts. I'm all for admitting that there might be some people on the grassroots side of things that do occasionally get together just to hate on movies. I'm all for admitting that. But if we're allowed to acknowledge that audiences sometimes do that with movies like Captain Marvel or Last Jedi or what have you, then you must further admit that critics also sometimes do that with movies like Joker, Sonic the Hedgehog, and or the Super Mario Brothers movie that came out recently. If you can acknowledge that both of these things happen, then I would ask you why in the fuck you have such a problem with review bombing when it comes from the grassroots, but you don't have any problem with review bombing either in the negative or the affirmative when it comes to the critical class. And if it's something, the critics are valid, derp, then your opinion does not matter because no one gives a fuck about what you deem to be valid or not. The only way someone can actually be invalid on a site like Rotten Tomatoes is if they use fake accounts to overrepresent their opinion by leaving multiple negative reviews when they're just one person, or if they somehow hack in and use bots. If neither of these things are happening, then you must concede that the person who left that negative review meant that negative review and actually believes the things they said. And no amount of moral invalidity is going to change the fact that numerically their opinion matters. And if it is wrong to review bomb a movie on the grassroots side of things, then it is also wrong to review bomb a movie on the aristocratic, valid people side of things. If the audience can't um dissent over things like Captain Marvel or The Last Jedi, then the critics also shouldn't be allowed to viscerally dissent over things like Joker or the Super Mario Brothers movie. And if one of these things is allowed, then they should both be allowed, and you should fuck off if you think otherwise. Moving on.
At 6 for users' review count, they would need to verify that they bought tickets, which they could do most easily by purchasing via Fandango. Under the new rules, audience scores for tentpole movies have often gone an early lift since most of the first weekend crowds are diehards who buy tickets in advance. In June, as per the Flash bragged about an audience score of 95% as of uh, June the 14th, 2023, which was the Wednesday that showtimes began in international markets such as Belgium and Finland, but 2 days before the film's U.S. release. Today's score is 83. Okay, it should.
There
What came out?
are a couple problems with your new audience score selection method. One, it overrepresents the opinions of people who use Fandango. Two, it overrepresents the people who want to be positive about a movie, because I guarantee you that if someone who actually bought a ticket, knowingly and willfully bought a ticket, and also has a negative opinion of the movie that they are shown, like a severely negative opinion, like a 1 or 2 star review, very often their reviews will be seen as trolling regardless of the fact that they can prove they bought a ticket. Because it is simply down to part moral framework and part normative consensus, which means if you stray too far away from the normative consensus or the moral framework that we have decided is the correct one, it doesn't matter how many tickets you buy or can prove that you bought. If you leave a review that's too negative or that focuses on the wrong material as defined by us, you will be dismissed somehow. Therein lies the problem. And that's why most audience scores now are in the 90s, regardless of the fact that those movies obviously still don't do well with the general public. Not because all the negative reviews were just trolls, okay, but because if you presuppose that all the negative reviews are just trolls, okay, then it's unsurprising that you will be left with a fucktardedly high review score at the end. Especially when you consider that very often Rotten Tomatoes will decide that a review is positive if it's in the middle road, even if the actual text of the review itself is negative. And to be fair, they do that with the critics too. Very often a critic will leave a 3-star review, but if the movie is trending in the positive or trending in the negative, their 3-star review will be taken as either positive or negative depending on what the overall consensus happens to be. It's one of the things that makes Rotten Tomatoes unreliable for everyone. Be you a fan, be you a critic, or be you somewhere in between. If you go too far away from the consensus and you're not a top reviewer, according to their system, then your negative review will get memory hold. And if you have a positive review of a movie that everyone is shitting on, your positive review will also get memory hold because you strayed too far from the consensus and you weren't important enough to be considered a top critic, quote unquote. There's your problem. Moving on.
A bigger change came in 2018 when Ron Tomatoes loosened the restrictions on whose reviews could be indexed. Once the site had required its contributors to write for publications with substantial web traffic or print circulation. Now, more freelance and self-publishing critics have been allowed to join along with some who review movies via YouTube or podcasts. Did I cut out?
Yeah, it got garbled towards the end of your sentence there.
Sorry. Okay. Now, more freelance and self-publishing critics have been allowed to join along with some who review movies via YouTube or podcasts.
Yes, because whether the old media likes it or not, the times they are changing and they're never going back to the way they were. People respect the opinions of YouTube reviewers far more than they respect the opinions of newspaper or magazine reviewers anymore. The last truly great old school reviewer prior to the internet era was Roger Ebert and his buddy Gene Siskel. Those two were the poster boys for reviews back in the day. But I believe both of them actually now are dead. Siegel might still be alive though. I don't remember. I know Roger Ebert has long since been no more, but yeah, those were the last two genuinely respected non-YouTube or non-internet reviewers. For better or worse, people respect the opinions of guys like Doug Walker, guys like Jeremy Johns, guys like Chris Stockman, guys like John Flickinger, the Flick Pick, etc., and so on. People respect internet reviewers way more than they respect terrestrial reviewers, because terrestrial reviewers still, to some degree, have the stink of being part of the media class. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but it ain't just Rotten Tomatoes reviews or reviews in general that this contempt for the officialdom is a thing now. Pretty much every aspect of the mainstream media is something that people fucking hate. So they would rather deal with people who they trust in the independent parasocial realms of the internet. And even then, it's getting to the point where even people like Chris Stuckman and Jeremy Johns are being trusted less than people who just, go and watch a movie and then do a vlog on it afterwards. Because people want to know what other ordinary people think, as long as those ordinary people can actually put their thoughts into words properly, more so than they want to know what the quasi-academic approach to film studies says. Moving on.
The movie has been widely characterized as a response to long-standing complaints over a lack of gender and diversity on the site and in criticism at
Frankly, the only diversity that I care about, keeping in mind that I am both disabled physically and gay.
Sorry. Sorry, I misread the first. That's on that. Let me reread that because I just misread. That's on that. The move had been widely characterized as a response to long-standing complaints over a lack of gender and racial diversity on the site. In criticism at large. I said movie instead of move. That was my bad.
Okay, but it doesn't really functionally change what I was going to say. Again, speaking as someone who is both physically disabled, gay, and a religious minority, the only diversity about which I give a fuck is diversity of thought. And there is exactly your fucking problem. Because I don't care about someone's demographic identity or demographic diversity. I care about their diversity of thought and their ability to, more importantly, form cogent goddamn thoughts about the movies they watch. If they can't do that, then I don't care how many political or social things I agree with them on. If they can't have an informed intellectual opinion on the thing that they are being paid to examine for a living, and have this thing we call independently minded diversity of thought, then I don't care. I never will care. Moving on. Unless you have anything to add to that.
I'll be honest, man. This feels like a lot more your article than anything. So I'm just reading it for you. That's about it.
At this point, I'm just yelling both at the stupidity of Rotten Tomatoes, but also at the stupidity of people trying to examine Rotten Tomatoes. And instead of putting 2 and 2 together and getting 4, they somehow come up with fish. And yes, that was a Fairly Odd Parents reference.
I was gonna say I feel like I know that.
That is a reference to, that is a reference to one of the most famous memes in Fairly Odd Parents history, specifically from the episode Abracatastrophe.
I haven't seen Fairly Odd Parents in years. No, like 15 years.
To me, I think they would have been better off ending with the Wishology trilogy. I know a lot of people say they wanted it to end at Channel Chasers, I, however, disagree because some of their best work happened after Channel Chasers. So my cutoff date for Fairly Odd Parents is the Witchology trilogy. I think the
I've
Witchology
always
trilogy would have
okay. So
been the perfect place to place the cutoff.
I mean, I don't. It's complicated for me because again, I'll be honest. Fairly Odd Parents was not a show I watched regularly as a kid.
Hmm.
I was more a Cartoon Network kid.
I was too, but I did it. Most of what I know of Nickelodeon comes from the like '90s, early 2000s era, like Hey Arnold, Invader Zim, the Angry Beavers, Our Real Monsters.
Yeah. I think the one
That
I
show
remember
should have
most.
gone on for like 5 seasons, and it only went on for not even a full season, and that pisses me off. But we did get the finale movie from Netflix, the Enter the Florbus, which was good.
I will say that is a horrifying thing. When you really look at it.
I mean, there were a lot of really horrifying kids shows when we were kids, like Courage the Cowardly Dog, Our Real Monsters,
I've
Grim
never,
Adventures of Billy and Mandy, aka Grim and Evil slash.
so full honesty, I've never seen Real Monsters.
Oh, child.
I think it came out in the '90s, and I never saw any like reruns of it, like on Nicktoons or anything.
Yeah, I keep forgetting there are 4 years between the two of us. I think I was one of the last honest '90s kids. Then again, speaking of shows that should have gotten way more play that were in the vein of being slightly creepy, Making Fiends. Making
I
Fiends should have.
okay, I I saw brief glimpses of that on Nicktoons when it was airing. I couldn't really get into it though.
A lot of Nickelodeon's best material wound up on Nicktoons and never got any play, which annoyed me. Like
Okay, sorry, this is a tangent here, but it's just I want to kind of break from this. To be honest, do you
mhm.
remember Zebo 3?
Vague memories of Zebo, yes.
It was based off the character, like the superhero line of like the Skechers dudes.
Yeah. I remember those commercials. I grew up with a lot of those commercials being on
Yeah,
air.
me too. Um, that was actually a really good like original like superhero property. But I'm kind of sad it only got one season. It was really good actually. Like it was really well made.
I didn't watch much of Zebo 3. The show that I loved that I am annoyed didn't, apart from Making Fiends, because I will forever maintain that the fact that Making Fiends got treated so badly is just abjectly it just abjectly pisses me off. But apart from Making Fiends, there is a show there is a show in the vein of an action cartoon that was released, I think, solely on Nicktoons Network that was freaking amazing, and it annoys me that it didn't get more. And that
What was it
show is
called?
called 3 Delivery. It's
Ah,
kind of
yeah. I know what you're talking about.
it's
Yeah, I remember watching that.
it's kind of weirdly a mix between Jackie Chan Adventures and Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it is just as awesome as that would imply.
I
That
think it was,
description that I just gave.
you're gonna find this weird, and you might have to look this up later. But I believe there was a live action adaptation of it.
There was a live action adaptation of 3 Delivery.
I think so. It like some foreign adaptation of it, like live action.
It wouldn't surprise me if it did really well in Japan. It does strike me as a kind of show that would have done really well in Japan. In fact, it might have originally been
I don't.
Japanese and just been transplanted over. I don't know, because Nicktoons did do that. Like when when they borrowed The Secret Show from BBC. Which, speaking of other awesome shows that should have gotten more of, The Secret Show is another good Nicktoons show that didn't do as well as it otherwise could have.
Anyway, shall we?
Yes, we shall continue. This concludes your 90s and early 2000s kid nostalgia, folks, for this particular section of the article anyway.
2017 study found that 80% of Rotten Tomatoes reviews of the highest grossing movies of that year had been written by white critics and 78% by men. With its more relaxed criteria, Rotten Tomatoes gave the critical conversation a hard push in the direction of inclusion, declared the New York Times. What is the point of this?
Because they assume that all white men must think the same, and therefore
I'm talking about the article as a whole. It just seems like it's jumping around sporadically.
They're
Like
basically trying to find any excuse to criticize Rotten Tomatoes, and so they will pick literally anything to criticize them over.
I don't get it. I really don't.
But more to the point, there is no such thing as the white hive mind or the male hive mind. It doesn't matter if every single critic on Rotten Tomatoes was white and male. If they all individually had different ideas, then who gives a fuck? The real criticism that you can levy at Rotten Tomatoes is it did help solidify this idea of critics as like an aristocratic or intellectual caste or class. And that, in and of itself, is the biggest problem. Not that too many of one demographic was overrepresented in the critical class, but that the critics regard themselves as some kind of intellectual class to begin with. They are not such a thing. And the idea of freaking critics as some kind of aristocracy unto themselves is freaking annoying. Moving on.
Rotten Tomatoes says that more than 1,000 new critics have become Tomato meter approved since 2018, bringing the site's total to about 3,500. Of those members, the company says 50% are women and 24% are people of color. Rotten Tomatoes also says that with individuals who identify as LGBTQ+, or say they have a disability factor, 66% of the new critics come from underrepresented groups. Every bit helps, of course, and I wouldn't presume to argue with a company's whole business is calculated in percentages. But I might quibble with adding 500 women and another 500 men, 3/4 of them white, to an already overwhelmingly male and white group of around 2,500 does not seem like it would radically alter the imbalances that precipitated the original criticism.
Okay, people are not hive minds. Demographics are not hive minds. Identities are not hive minds. And there is no such thing as a universal male opinion or a universal white opinion. What kind of stupidity are you dealing with if that is how you think? And no, it doesn't make me feel seen to know that other people who are disabled or other people who are LGBT are on the cast of Rotten Tomatoes. What makes me feel seen as an individual is when my own opinions are seen and or go viral and or resonate with people. Because you see, I am an individual capable of diverse, independent thoughts. In case that possibility completely got left out of the Venn diagram here. No amount of other disabled people or other gay people will ever be able to replicate what I think, because I am an individual, and so is everyone else.
Well, still kind of gaming.
Hello, Ahsoka. How are you?
Okay, another.
I'm being told that I should be grateful that the critical class includes gay people and disabled people, even though they are a bunch of aristocratic toffs who don't represent my opinions in any way whatsoever. And as you can imagine, it's pissing me off. Moving on.
Remember when Rotten Tomato removed like hundreds of thousands of reviews just to make the movie have a positive review?
Yeah, we just got done just got done addressing that particular clusterfuck. But now they're pulling the SJW bullshit of, well, everyone in a given demographic thinks the same, and therefore, even though literally every variable that they've addressed is incidental, and they failed to address the single one that matters, which is class. Because, as I just got done going over, the biggest problem of Rotten Tomatoes is it solidified this idea that critics themselves are a class unto themselves. And yet the only kind of diversity that might counteract this would be classist diversity, but that's the one diversity they don't want. Because they want everyone to be indoctrinated into film school logic. And they don't want anyone to dissent from film school logic. Heaven forfend people of lower class who just care about things like entertainment would matter at all.
We shouldn't be glad they are self-serving people who don't care about them. They are basically the worst side of people to represent even who they are trying to represent. Critics aren't a class, they are a place.
I mean, in theory, they wouldn't be, because in theory, they would be in touch with what people actually want and would convey this information to the studios. Unfortunately, they get brainwashed into a bunch of film school critical theory nonsense and therefore begin to think like aristocrats. And not only do they begin to think like aristocrats, they lose their ability to think like a goddamn human being in the interim.
No one is going to want that outside of the Hollywood. Hell, if you make an English-speaking movie, it's likely to be reviewed in Hollywood.
Yeah, fair enough.
Enough?
Yep, moving forward.
But the change helped with another issue. In 2017, a string of bad movies, including Baywatch, Tomorrow Meter score 17%, and Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, 30%, crossed in theaters. Studios blamed Rotten Tomatoes. The critic aggregation site increasingly is slowing down the potential for remakes of popcorn movies, reported Deadline. Many of those in the industry severely question how Rotten Tomatoes computes its ratings, and the fact that these scores run on Fandango, which owns our Rotten Tomatoes, is an even bigger problem. The Green Ahsoka's comment.
Yeah, sorry, I got distracted because my mom came in to try and move a dresser that was in my room, so that my brother's girlfriend could use it because she's staying with us from now until the foreseeable future. Anyway, sorry, momentary distraction over.
Do you want me to read that or?
No, I got it. I was listening. I wasn't. I was trying not to say anything because I didn't know how much of my mom moving stuff around would come through the mic. But moving forward.
All right. I mean, do you have anything to say to what I read?
No, just move on with the next bit, and we will continue from there.
Did the allegedly more inclusive Rotten Tomatoes have simply expanded its ranks in hopes that new critics would be nicer to the IP-driven event movies that Hollywood mostly depends on? Intentional or not, this appears to be what happened. According to a study by Global News in 2016, the average tomato score for all wide releases was in the rotten low 50s. By 2021, that average had climbed to a fresh 60%.
I don't understand why that's particularly a problem. I mean, the fact that people are over reliant on critics and Rotten Tomatoes in particular is itself a problem, but the fact that their scores tend to end up in the middle doesn't seem to be that much of a problem. If Hollywood wants better scores, then they should make better movies. Or they should find a better class of critics to take their cues from. Ideally both.
Hello, Dragon Show. You're fine being late. It's no problem. Honestly, I would prefer you not be here when we cover the most stupid shit to save your brain. And I'm doing well. Besides, obviously, covering this very stupid article. So.
Mm-hmm. I say we give this one about 10 more minutes and then move on to the next topic. Because we've been at it for an hour.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe 5 instead of 10. Just kind go quicker.
Okay.
The benefits have not been universally distributed. Some whom I spoke with complained that Rotten Tomatoes' larger poll has been tougher on art house movies. Publicist number 2 worked on an indie director's recent drama that got rave reviews from all the highbrow critics, including a great time review. And yet it was their lowest Rotten Tomatoes score ever. The movies that need high scores most are often more challenging and may not appeal to the whole gamut of Rotten Tomatoes reviewers.
Honestly, I would call that a good thing that art house movies don't get rave reviews from everyone, because frankly, art house movies are pretentious thematic schlock that don't have any relevance to anyone, and the fact that so many highbrow critics decide to jizz their pants over them is ridiculous.
Okay, so I've heard the term so much. I don't think I ever had it explained to me. What the fuck is a art house movie?
Basically, the kind of stuff that gets nominated for Oscars, but nobody cares enough to see.
Okay, because in my mind, for some reason, every time I picture like art house film, whenever I hear the term, the movie that comes to mind, or movies specifically, are like Wes Anderson movies.
Sorry, my family heard my turn of phrase and they all about they're over it, which one would think that would incentivize them to watch it more often, but oh well.
But yeah, every time when I just reiterate my point. Every time I heard art house movies, I always thought of like Wes Anderson movies, those kind of movies.
He's actually he's a niche director, but he's not exactly what you could call an art house director anymore. He certainly was when he got started, but but he's made a big enough name for himself that he's not really explicitly art house anymore. Same thing with like Guillermo del Toro or like Christopher Nolan. Art
Well, okay.
house mo- Art house movies are the kind of movies that deliberately try to bore their audience or to be devoid of entertainment in the hopes of being a high art piece, basically. Like, imagine all the negative stereotypes of modern art that you can think of like art galleries and stuff. Art house movies are the kind of movies that do that, but with film instead of paintings.
Logical bullshit that tries to be deep but is so vapid and vain that it has no actual deep meaning to it.
That is correct. Or at the very least, that is a workable definition.
Well, that's how I describe modern art.
Yeah, it basically art house movies are modern art with cinema instead of paint.
Okay. Well, last thing again.
Hmm.
Maybe that indie director should have hired Bunker 15. Rotten Tomatoes' new membership rules might have enabled the publicity company's MO by providing a wider supply of critics receptive to its pitch, which seems to have become more explicit over time. I would like to know if you don't post negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. A Bunker 15 employee wrote the critic. What wrote the one critic in August 2022? Uh, okay. Bunker 15's main business appears to be small films released to video on demand with little other promotion. It often helps them meet the 5 review threshold required to receive a Tomato meter score. The company's website mentions micro indies such as Cold November, Tulsa, and Bushman Busman Holiday, which have only a smattering of reviews each. But Bunker 15 has worked on medium-sized titles too. According to critics who have interacted with these companies, these include 2022's Wildflower and with Yerman Shipka and Alexandra Daddario. 2023's Burt Reynolds, The Last Interview, Bruce Willis's Gasoline Alley, whose
Wait,
2022 release was
Kiernan
overshadowed by.
Shipka, Kiernan Shipka was in a movie. Good for her. I'm glad that she still has a career after Sabrina. She was Sabrina in the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina Netflix reboot. I'm glad
Um,
I'm glad to see she still has a career, although as with most actors and directors, I would prefer they got a career in movies people actually would want to see instead of art house schlock, but eh. Especially because
who,
I would imagine for Kiernan Shipka that would be a downgrade given how much notoriety she had coming off of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Bruce Willis's Gasoline Alley, whose 2022 release was overshadowed by the news that Willis had been diagnosed with aphasia and may not have been aware he was still making movies. Huh.
I mean, I don't know off the top of my head what that is, unless the word is actually aphasia.
It might
But
be aphasia.
okay, but in any case, whether or not a actor is diagnosed with an illness doesn't really matter to the quality of the movie. Um, Although obviously, if a actor delivers a bad performance and then it gets revealed that they were sick at the time, then that certainly does soften the blow somewhat. However, most of the reason why art house movies don't get good or shouldn't get good reviews is because they are deliberately uninteresting, unentertaining, and unappealing to anyone who isn't part of the critical class or the art school mentality. And frankly, the art school mentality is so facile and counterproductive and stupid that I think the world of art would be better off without it. Critical theory as a whole and anything rooted in the Frankfurt School is bullshit and should be gotten rid of.
Okay, last thing. I found negative reviews of several 2023 movies, including one of the above on a Bunker 15 affiliated site where, unlike the author's other reviews, they were apparently hidden from Rotten Tomatoes.
Which again just proves that Rotten Tomatoes will edit out reviews that stand too far against the consensus. If the consensus says that this is a good movie, then bad reviews will get nuked. If the consensus says that it's a bad movie, then any reviews defending it will get nuked. Moving forward, choose the next topic.
Hello, Chrononaut, because I'm great. Responding to the Seinfeld thing.
Yeah. Good
So
for you, Brian.
So that's something I sent. It's actually fairly even in terms of this week.
I think so, yeah. The Dave Bautista thing?
Yeah. So this is from fandomwire.com. I don't care. I'm playing him. Dave Bautista held meetings with WB and DC for a villain role they never intended to cast in DC. It's written by Raul Castro.
Spoilers, he wants to play Bane. Why this wasn't the first idea in everyone's head, I don't know, but he wants to play Bane, and I say he should be allowed to.
Yeah. And this was published September 19th, 2023. So, first, Dave Bautista is no stranger to big franchising and blockbuster films. Since he departed from WWE, he has focused on trying to make a successful career in Hollywood. I say he's been really successful.
Yeah, he's done a really good job. I mean,
like, I'll be fully honest, I did not know he was in WWE until it was told to me later on after I've seen like a bunch of things.
I mean, he'll probably be most remembered at this point for Drax. And I do somewhat dislike his desire to play against type so much, because he has tried in recent years to give himself a little bit more artistic cachet by taking more serious roles. And I just, as usual, my stance is, if you have a system that works and people enjoy seeing you in it, then fuck playing against type. I would say embrace the type you have to the most of your ability. That being said, him deciding he wants to play Bane is very much in type. So I guess this is him kind of taking my advice and deciding to stop fighting the typecasting so much.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to we're not going to have a discussion that we usually have about the whole type thing. Because one, Dave Bautista is a very versatile actor. I think I've seen him in like very different roles and stuff, but he's a great actor. Like, I don't think that is something you can't disagree with me on.
I mean, sure. I just get really annoyed when artists get egos and be like, well, I have to do the exact opposite of what people expect me to do, because otherwise, why do I bother? kind of thing. It annoys me.
You good?
Yes, I realize that I realize that this is somewhat annoying that I go on about this, but it does piss me off when people feel the need to. I'm just gonna be the opposite of what I'm supposed to be because I want to for no good reason. It pisses me off. Like you won the game already. You know, you won by doing the thing you're good at. Try not to fuck it up. Is all I'm saying.
I'm aware of what you're saying. You say it all the time.
hmm
Anytime it's gets brought up, you always bring that up.
Yes,
And I get
because
it, but
it's
I think
arrogant and it annoys me.
if an actor is good enough, I'm fine with them playing any role as long as they put their all into it. That's kind of my stance on it. Well, I agree. The arrogance part is incredibly dumb and shouldn't be there. I don't think it's a bad idea to play against either not play against types, but play a different role than what you've played before. You know.
I don't know. I have a lot more respect for actors that realize they won the lottery and then just decide to run with it. Like John Delancey, who played Q in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Every time he shows up, or I should say, almost every time he shows up, he plays some variation on a nigh omnipotent trickster, and everyone is happy for him playing that role. Mads
Yeah,
Mikkelsen always plays some variation on Hannibal Lecter, and everyone is better off for him doing that.
you done?
I don't get this. Well, I mean, I get it in the sense of it's an arrogance thing of I should be able to do the exact opposite of what I'm supposed to do and still win somehow thing. But it gets to me.
Okay.
Moving forward.
Right. He has been in some of the biggest movies and franchises, including playing Drax in the MCU, Mr. Hinks in Spectre, Sapphire Morton in Blade Runner 2049. I will say he was actually one of the better parts of that movie, from what I remember seeing of that movie.
I I repressed most of that movie from my memory just because it's Denis Villeneuve trying his damnedest to be artsy and it pissed me off.
And Glasso Rabin in Dune next year. He has also branched out and played against type characters in films like Knock at the Cabin and Glass Onion and Knives Out. I don't think Glass Onion was him going against type, to be fair.
I don't think Knock at the Cabin was particularly against type either. I don't get I guess a good question here would be what does this article define his type to be? The only difference between Drax and the character he was playing in Knock at the Cabin was he wasn't an idiot in that, but he was still very stoic. He was still sort of the imposing muscle dude. So I don't get the I like that's the other thing. Half the time, people who praise people for playing against type don't even know what the type they're supposed to be going against is.
Okay, Don, we're just rehashing things here at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ever since his friend and longtime collaborator James Gunn became the head of DC at Warner Brothers, fans have been speculating whether he would bring in people from Guardians of the Galaxy to play prominent roles in the new DCU. A past comment made by Batista about his dream DC role comes to mind, of people adding to their belief that Gunn might involve him in his next venture.
I mean, on the one hand, I wouldn't mind seeing the Guardians actors if they can find the right role for them, and I do think having Dave Batista play Bane makes all the sense. Especially if he's willing to bulk up more for the role. Um, but but I don't get this obsession with, well, the Guardians actors were working with James Gunn, so of course he's gonna bring them in eventually. No, like, if he can find a
No,
role for them, sure. But
I mean, I get it because the Guardians actors were like very like with Gunn with the whole like firing from Marvel at the time and stuff, and
like, I could definitely see Chris Pratt playing Booster Gold. That would be really fun, I think.
yeah. Dave Bautista desperately wanted to play Bane in the DC project. Dave Bautista has played the role of Drax in James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, and now Gunn has taken over the reins over the overall creative vision of DC. We've made our opinions known about that. I'm not going to go into that into here. Is that been consequential to this, I believe?
Yeah, this is more about Dave Bautista. It's not about James Gunn and his perpetual ability to fuck everything up.
Yeah. Okay. We're good. We're good. We've covered it. We've talked about it ad nauseum. We're not doing that here.
Mm-hmm.
Many people believe that he would bring in his friends from the films and even see his take part in the adventure. I mean, he did bring his brother, who plays Weasel. So, also Michael Rooker.
I mean to be fair, it's not like James Gunn is above doing stunt casting for people that he likes. And again, I just want to go on record here and say, having Dave Bautista play Bane would be very, very good. Also, isn't Dave is Dave Bautista Hispanic, or am I completely bullshitting?
Hold on, I'm looking it up because I don't know myself. Hold on.
Because the name Batista sounds vaguely Hispanic to me, but it might also be Italian.
Stilton?
Mm-hmm.
You might want to stop before you say something stupid.
All I'm saying is the name Batista sounds like it might come from that part of the world. I don't know whether it's Italian or whether it's Hispanic, but it's somewhere in that general region, I would imagine. Because I do think Bane should finally be played by a Hispanic actor one of these days.
Yeah, I think they turned him South American. Okay, so he's a Greek Filipino descent.
Okay, so he is Philippines is Spanish descended, so that works actually.
Okay, hold on. Let me read a little more because I want to hold my opinion until we're kind of sort of towards the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
Bautista has previously revealed his dream DC role that he wants to play, and has even tried to have a meeting with the head of DC at the time to make it happen. He said, "Oh, it would be Bane all day long. I've made no secret about this. I want to play Bane so bad. I went to Warner Brothers, had an appointment with them, had an appointment with DC, walked in the door and said, I want to play Bane. I'm not kidding." They were a little like, whoa, we're not even casting. I was like, I don't care. I'm playing him.
Let the man play Bane, for God's sake.
He has he is. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say the fact that he has the fact that he is aware of Bane, and I'm guessing the fact that he wants to play him knows a lot of the deeper lore of the character.
Yeah, he's fanboying. That quote is self-evident fanboying, right?
Yeah.
And he has the actual physicality to play Bane, especially if he decided to bulk up even more. So, like,
with Gunn now at the helm of the entire DC, one hopes that Gunn brings his friend Batista to be a part of his DC role. But according to a recent comment by Batista, it seems James Gunn's vision of the DCU does not fit Jake. The fuck?
Well, James, I hate to be this guy, especially because I have literal optic nerve damage. So my vision, in the very literal sense, is shit. But maybe you just need to get your artistic eyes checked, my dude, because he wants to play. He wants to play the character. He has the physicality and acting presence to play the character. You've worked with him before, so you know you get along with him. And everyone and their mother would be happy to see him play the character. So, pourquoi does he not get to play the character? Why would you not take this opportunity to literally just go and have a fan win? It At this point, it seems like oddly James Gunn has an irrational fear of pleasing the fandom. Like, I know we said we weren't going to bring up too much of the other stupidity that James Gunn is doing, but this is all very much in line with the other stupidity that James Gunn is doing. It seems like for some reason he has a pathological need not to please the fans, and it's pissing me off. Because there's literally no good goddamn reason why he wouldn't work Bane into the plan somewhere so that Batista could play him.
James Gunn announced his new vision for the DCU with a slate of projects in various stages of development. Batista revealed in a recent interview that he realized Gunn's overall direction of the DCU is a unique approach, and he does not fit into that world and the characters that he has written. Told Insider, I have had conversations with James about that, but I think the direction he's leading in completely rebuilding the whole universe. He's starting from scratch, he's starting younger and fresher, and I think we need to do that. I think for the DC universe to be revived, you need to start from scratch, and I think you need to start with major action. You need to start plan 15 years, and I just don't think you can do that with me.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with that theory. You might be starting with a younger Superman, and even then, just barely, but you might be starting with a younger Superman. But as far as I understand it, and we reacted to James Gunn's announcement of Chapter 1, he does want an already established, already somewhat old Batman. To the point that they're starting with Damian Wayne instead of Dick, Jason, or Tim. So, if the Batman you're working with is already established in the canon of your version of the DC universe, which, by the way, you probably should get Jensen Ackles to be your new Batman, because that's basically the only, like, that level of fan casting is pretty much the only way you're going to get away with having two Batmen at the same time and not just making Robert Pattinson the DCU's Batman. But you want to start with an already established Batman one way or the other. So if we're dealing with a Batman who's already had Dick, Tim, and Jason, not necessarily in that order, and therefore already has, he already had the fling with Talia, and therefore already had a son, which is Damian. Why the fuck can't Dave Batista play Bane? I am looking for a justification as to why Dave Batista cannot play Bane with the Batman mythos that James says he's establishing, and I just can't see it. Because if you were tying in Robert Pattinson Batman and going from younger to older, I could at least see that, because that would mean that Dave Batista would be in his 60s by the time he was breaking the bat. Now, granted, that's no reason he couldn't still do it, because you could still have an older Bane breaking a younger Batman. But if they were doing the smart thing and bringing Robert Pattinson into the DCU, I could at least understand that. But that's not what James says he wants to do. He says he wants to use an already established Batman and have the first on-screen Robin with him be Damian Wayne instead of Dick, Jason, or Tim. So, Defa. Moving forward.
So Brian Charles said, not sure if that's what you're saying, but I'm against trying to shoehorn Bane into an existing idea just to keep the actor innocent and not an egotistical asshole. I don't think that's what we're saying.
Well, but the thing is, things are already in flux as they are. Like the plan is not yet set, and you have an actor literally volunteering, "I will play Bane for you, James." So it is a little silly to me to not to mention would that please Dave Bautista, because by the sounds of it, Dave Bautista is a massive fanboy for this character, which would be good. But also, both for the sake of fanboy points, getting an actor who really, really wants to play a character is a good thing. But also, I guarantee you that every person who likes Dave Bautista as Drax, or almost every person who likes Dave Bautista as Drax, would be over the moon to have him play Bane. Because I'm sitting here only kind of minorly liking Drax, and I'm already sold on the idea of having Dave Bautista play Bane. So why the fuck couldn't there be a?
Okay, but I don't think the shoehorning.
No, by no means shoehorn him in. But one thing I am saying is the plan is already in a state of flux to begin with. So you're telling me there's absolutely no room for Bane anywhere? Like, is the only excuse I can come up with is maybe because this is already an established Batman, Bane has already done the back-breaking thing and is dead somehow. Like maybe if the back-breaking storyline already happened to this version of Batman and somehow Bane died at the end of it, that might be a good reason not to have Bane in this universe. But even then, you could still use Dave Bautista as Bane in like PTSD flashbacks or something. Because
I don't.
But that's pretty much the only reason I can think of not to let Dave Bautista have his moment as Bane. Unless, of course, James Gunn. Go ahead.
What I was going to say was, as far as I am aware, and feel free anyone who knows anything that I don't, there has been no talk of a villain for Batman Brave and the Bold movie, right? Or any actual casting.
No, it's literally in the conceptual stages still.
Right. So there's possibility to have Bane in there. Granted, I think thematically, it's technically well. I mean, given Bane's actual story and origin, and given what they want to do with Batman and Bane, which will be like a tackle of fatherhood and stuff, there could be something there. Obviously,
you could have Bane actually act as like a potential false father figure, like have Bane. You could actually have Bane encourage Damian's more assassin-y tendencies and act as like a
dark figure.
A false surrogate father figure would be interesting, and then you would.
I'm sorry, what I was going to say would also be given that he is a son that was paying for the crimes of his father, he could be a dark reflection of the like a potential dark future or end result for Damian, as like a mirror of his relationship with his father and with Batman and Robin.
Right, and you could also have it be that part of Damian's character arc is being tempted to side with Bane because of because of the training from Roz and Talia, and then having him choose between the father figure that he wants in like a boyish, encouragement sort of sense, which is Bane, versus the father figure that is actually better for him, which is Bruce. Having Damien kind of being
anyway.
stuck between, choosing between surrogate father figure and actual father figure would be interesting.
And I feel like that would work more with like Ra's al Ghul being his grandfather. So
I mean, maybe, but I was thinking more in terms of personality, like Bane as a surrogate father figure would encourage all of the murderous, hyper-violent tendencies that Bruce is trying to basically program out of Damien. It's kind of like the difference between the real mother and the other mother in Coraline almost. Like here is Damien's like wish fulfillment father figure, the father figure who wants to encourage him to be the most violent sociopathic little shit he can be, versus the responsible real world father figure, which is Bruce, trying to get him to be a well-rounded person.
anyway, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the piece is quote. And I understand that. And also, I have to say that I appreciate that because I don't want to play a character that I can't bring justice to it. I don't think at this point in my career that I can bring justice to Billy anymore. He's 55. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
not a bad age.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of hurts. Although it is sad news for people who were hoping to see the piece that portray the iconic DC villain, his comics are understandable. It reflects his desire to now force himself to do something that he cannot convincingly portray anymore due to his age. He is not worried about losing the part as he is busy as ever with many exciting projects lined up. He has Dune Part 2 releasing next year. He will also star in the action comedy films My Spy, The Eternal City, and The Killer's Game.
I mean, Bane, yes, is for hire Dragon Turtle, but he's far from just a henchman. He is. This is one area where they always fall short with Bane. He is as much a physical match for Batman as he is a mental match for him. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Bane have a doctorate, and isn't he the one who makes his own Venom in the original canon? Am I completely insane? Because I could have sworn that was a thing. Honestly, I would have Bane be hired by Roz to try and get Damien back in the fold. That's how I would do it. But I'm weird.
Um, okay, so from what I understand, 'cause I haven't done a lot of shooting, but yeah, I don't think he has a doctorate. He is incredibly smart because he read a lot. Um, and he is actually he is on the similar level to Batman. He's a genius.
Which is why he's the one who
Um,
breaks the bat in that storyline.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Master strategist, skill fire, like the Daniel said. Um, he is. That's what has always bugged me with like the interpretations in like media. Like they constantly fuck him over. Like in other
They always
fantasy
turn him into just
comics.
a thug.
Well, that or a henchman or a dumbass.
I mean, let's not even talk about Batman and Robin, because Batman and Robin was not nice to anyone. Also,
Uh,
it will never ever cease
um,
to piss me off. They had Arnold Schwarzenegger in Batman and Robin, and for some fucking reason, they didn't cast him as Bane.
there's also a thing of thing I was going to talk. The thing why I would be so excited to see Dave Bautista, no matter his age, play Bane is because he can really sell that intellectual part of things that honestly needs to be shown more in like live action stuff. Because again, honestly, he's probably like in terms of Gotham's like intellectual society, he is one of the smartest people there.
At least when he's in Gotham. Most of the time, he's off in other parts of the world doing other parts of the world things.
Yeah,
He mostly just
I also
keeps
found out
returning to
apparently Bane
Gotham
has a
because
daughter.
Batman manages to beat him.
Yeah, yeah. I found out that apparently Bane has a daughter in the comics.
Is that a recent development, or has that been a thing for a while?
Yeah, I think it is relatively a recent development. Apparently, she's a clone of his DNA that was meant to. Well, no, okay. It was in the Dark Multiverse. My bad. Like, and where like Nightfall happened and John Paul Valley won, and she was created to avenge her father.
Mm-hmm.
Her name was Vengeance.
Hmm.
But also, yeah, Bane is a very interesting character when you really look into it more and stuff. And it does piss me off that it's one of those characters that, while is not my favorite in terms of Batman's rogue, is pretty fascinating, and I would love to see actually done justice in life.
Batman has a lot of really good rogues that never seems to get much play. I mean, everybody loves the Joker, and all more power to them for loving the Joker. But like, Batman does have other, as much as it gives the Joker like relationship PTSD, he does have other enemies.
Yeah,
That's that's
personally,
one of
my
my
favorite.
favorite moments in the Lego Batman movie was when the Joker realized Batman had other enemies, and he felt like um a dejected ex when he found out. Like, you've been
I'll be
fighting
honest,
with other people.
my favorite one is Scarecrow.
I really love the Clock King. I wish the Clock King got more respect.
You're just saying them because of that one episode in the Batman
It
animated series.
Yes, because it's fucking amazing. And he's actually one of those characters that's more interesting without bullshit powers. Because in his second and third appearance in Batman the Animated Series, they gave him bullshit time powers, and that annoys me. Because in his original appearance, he was basically like an evil like efficiency expert slash like a Phileas Fogg XP from around the world in 80 days, and it worked so well. And then they
Right.
gave him bullshit time powers in the other episodes, and it was like, aw.
Right. So this some Dawn sent me from Mr. H Reviews, more stupidity from Marvel and Disney.
Yeah. And long story short, he makes stupid arguments in it, particularly pertaining to multiverse madness. Which again, I just want to say for the record, you can dislike that movie and you can have issues with that movie. The issue I take with so many people, especially on the side that the side that we're also technically on, the anti-SJW side, is it very much seems like they watched the movie, but they didn't pay any goddamn attention to the movie. And as a result, a lot of their arguments against the movie are really, really freaking stupid. and just like we did with Gary,
Oh yeah.
I I want to also say we don't have any problem with Mr. H. You know, in general, I think his content is really really good. Um, it's just that in this one case, I don't know if he woke up on the wrong side of the bed or something, but a lot of his arguments are really stupid and counterproductive. But moving ahead with the banana. Unless you had anything else to add.
I was just gonna say like, yeah, no one's above criticism with us. Everyone's
Yeah,
critical.
no. Yeah. It doesn't matter if 99% of all your arguments do
That's
hold
about it.
water, that 1% is fair game to be rebutted.
Yeah. It's about 6 minutes and 46 seconds. So shall we, or do you need to exit real
Yes.
quick to see it, or can you see it?
No, I can see it just fine. Banana.
Okay. Uh, banana.
Banana.
What? Oh, okay. Okay. I might have
What?
to exit real quick because for some reason you are breaking up a lot. That might be on my end. So I think I might have to
I'm
leave real quick and
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's on your end, dude. So I will hold down the fort while you fix it.
I'll be right back.
Yep, yep.
Keep, keep our guests entertained, don't.
Mm-hmm. Do. Yes, Bane is most famously known as the man who broke the Bat's dragon turtle. Which I mean, to be fair, is not an easy thing to do. So good for him. Apologies for the dead air. I would sing, but the only contextually appropriate song to sing in this instance would be the Mr. Bane song, and I don't know that one well enough to sing it. And we're still waiting on Brainstormer to make his triumphant return. Okay, he's back.
Testing. You guys can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I don't know. That was weird.
Mhm. How about me? Can you hear me, or am I still breaking up badly?
No, you're good. You're good now. Yeah. So, yeah. That was.
Commencing the banana.
Well, a Marvel producer reveals that they're not that smart. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness producer justifies.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, let's let him actually make his case before we yell at the stupidity of it. But moving forward with the banana.
Oh.
Yep, banana.
Okay.
Scarlet Witch's descent into villainy? Huh. After WandaVision, that's not quite right, actually. But never mind, I guess we shall check this out, ladies and gents, because this is fascinating. And I think ultimately just shows that these people don't understand the properties.
Okay. I am very confused here because a lot of people on Mr. H's side of things were mad at the end of WandaVision, and by the way, I agreed with them that Wanda wasn't treated enough like a villain at the end of WandaVision because she did a bunch of heinous things, like mind controlling an entire town by accident, and she was never called to task for that. But most of his argument is structured along the lines of WandaVision did it right and Multiverse of Madness undid it, which maybe he disagrees with Mahler and Gary and the rest of them that Wanda should have been treated more like a villain at the end of WandaVision. To which I would have to say I disagree. I think it was stupid that Monica let Wanda off the hook at the end of WandaVision, and she should have been treated more like a villain. And if anything, the events of Multiverse of Madness were correcting the poor framing of the end of WandaVision. Because, again, she accidentally, and I will stress that she didn't, for most of the time she was mind controlling Westview, she didn't know that she was doing it. But then she was made aware that she was doing it, and then she continued to just long enough to say goodbye to her husband and her children. So Like, yeah, Monica probably should have been more along the lines of Everett Ross against the Hulk with Wanda by the end of WandaVision. But anyway, I'm just confused where Mr. H is falling on this one, because one of the few criticisms of Multiverse of Madness that I will give to Gary and Mahler and those sorts of people is that Wanda wasn't treated enough like a villain in WandaVision, so there was a kind of dissonance between Multiverse of Madness and WandaVision. However, one thing I will not give to Mahler and Gary and company is you should therefore give Multiverse of Madness more credit for fixing the mistake made by WandaVision rather than bitching that WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness were not linking up well. Because in this case, it's a good retcon, because Wanda wasn't treated enough like a villain at the end of WandaVision, and she definitely should have been. And Multiverse of Madness then proceeded to treat her like a villain at the end of after the events of WandaVision. But anyway, Banana.
Yeah.
That they are overseeing. I mean, that's not a stretch, is it? Let's get real here. So hit subscribe if you're new here. Guys, give the video a like and please share it. So,
obviously,
in WandaVision, we learned that Wanda Maximoff had used her chaos magic to obviously, infiltrate Westview, turn it into a sitcom. That's basically.
By mind controlling everyone in it by accident, and then continuing to even after she was made aware of it, so that she could say a meaningful goodbye to her husband and children. Hence why Monica Rambeau should have definitely treated her more like a villain than she did, and she should have chased her like Everett Ross chases the Hulk, instead of letting Wanda off the hook by saying they'll never know what you sacrificed for them. Moving forward. Banana.
Mm.
Basically what happened.
And it was all
a means of basically getting a happy ending with Vision and children. So she sort of conjured this all up, fabricated this reality
for
herself because of deep distress.
Now,
obviously, she became the Scarlet Witch, Wanda.
Yeah, that's the plot. You are kind of glossing over the whole mental whammy mind control thing she was doing to the entire time while she was doing that. Now, granted, I will make the argument to Gary and Mahler and Critical Drinker and the like that for most of the time she was in Westview, she didn't realize that. So the only thing she's guilty of, really, in terms of intent, is she forestalled letting them go after she was made aware that she was accidentally mind controlling them, in order that she could have time to say goodbye to Vision and her children, which I didn't find was that egregious, but in universe, i.e. the people in the MCU definitely should have regarded Wanda as a villain for, even if she was unaware of it for like 80% of the show, she was still mind controlling people. So even if she was unaware of that, that still makes Wanda basically a walking nuke. A walking magic nuke. In the same way that Everett Ross always goes after the Hulk because the Hulk is dangerous. And the fact that Monica did not go full Everett Ross on Wanda's ass is a major framing issue of WandaVision that was then corrected by the events of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, even though Gary and Critical Drinker and Mahler and the kind don't tend to give Multiverse of Madness enough credit for retconning the poor framing of WandaVision. Moving on. Banana.
Hunter flew into the unknown. Later shown
and was later shown to be studying the Darkhold.
So from there, she went on a
rampage through the multiverse.
In an effort to divorce America Chavez to take her to a world where she could be with Billy and Tommy again. Yeah, that's contradictory.
Yeah, that's the contradictory parts.
So she would then go on to.
No, there's no contradiction there. This is the thing. I don't understand where he is seeing the contradiction that exists is a contradiction in framing. Wanda did villainous things at the end of WandaVision. She was never called on those villainous things. Instead of calling Wanda on her villainous behavior and treating her like the walking nuke that she was, Monica Rambeau tried to let Wanda off the hook by saying, "You will never know what, or they will never know what you sacrificed for them," referring to husband and kids. She then, in an effort to learn about her powers, went to Agatha's cabin, took Agatha's copy of the Darkhold, and then sat alone with it in a room for 18 months. Because there are 18 months between the events of WandaVision and the events of Multiverse of Madness, according to the timeline. And because the Darkhold is very much a corrosive spiritual influence, similar to the One Ring or the Death Note, her sitting alone in a room with it for 18 months was not good for her, especially because, if you know the comics, you know, the Darkhold was written by a arch-dark god known as Chthon, sometimes referred to as the Demon of the Darkhold, who also happens to be the source of Scarlet Witch's actual powers. Her chaos magic is deliberately from Chthon in the comics, because she is the avatar of Chthon in the same way that Moon Knight is the avatar of Khonshu, or the Juggernaut classically is the avatar of Sidorak on Earth. So her magic comes from Chthon to begin with, and then she sits in a room alone with the Darkhold for 18 months, and it warps her perception because she had just gotten over severe grief, and then along comes the Darkhold as a negative influence, basically driving her into a relapse of said grief. In the same way as when you get a drug addict to go to AA or DA, I guess, Drug Addicts Anonymous, you don't want them to immediately go and hang out with their old dealer because their old dealer will cause them to relapse. That's what's being depicted in between WandaVision and Multiverse Madness. She is absolutely grief-stricken by the loss of Vision and the loss of the life she could have had with him. Her chaos magic actualizes that in the form of the Westview situation. She gets just enough closure to where she is okay with putting those things aside. Then she takes the Darkhold to try and learn more about the powers that led to the creation of Westview. The Darkhold is a negative influence on her and basically causes her grief to go through a state of relapsing, especially because she had been alone in a room with it for 18 months. I don't understand why the idea of she was okay for 5 seconds, and then because she was vulnerable, having just gotten that closure, the negative influence of the Darkhold was enough to tip her back in the other direction. That's not a unusual or controversial way for story arcs to progress, because here's especially the thing with large scale character arcs, i.e. when a character tries to reform something that is very central to their nature, it takes a long freaking time and it has to be repeatedly reinforced. Look at Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Look at Rumpelstiltskin and the Evil Queen in Once Upon a Time. Look at I'm trying to think of some other good examples. But yes, generally speaking, when you try to reform a part of your nature that is central to your character or extremely emotionally resonant with you, it's not just a switch you can flip of like, okay, I went through this trauma and now I'm fine. No, sometimes you have to relearn the lesson 2 or 3 different ways, because you might internalize the lesson part of the way, but not the whole way, and then you'll wind up in a relapse, especially if there's a negative influence like, oh, I don't know, a corruptive supernatural influence like, say, the Darkhold. Anyway, moving forward. Banana.
Slaughter. Earth 838's Illuminati, and it was clear that she was then going to be... I mean, it's funny. She's like, oh, it was clear. Scarlet Witch had headed down a villainous route. You think? By slaughtering people?
You think?
You just, I mean, come on now. Just a fraction.
Okay, I don't know why he's sarcastically poo-pooing her, because this is the writer of the movie or someone associated with the movie admitting that Wanda was villainous. And again, I want to go back to this because the biggest problem with WandaVision was the ending was not properly framed. She should have been treated like a monstrous villain at the very least during the ending when she was talking with Monica Rambeau. But instead of that, she was let off the hook by Monica because Monica got to know Billy and Tommy and therefore was willing to let bygones be bygones. That, however, was incorrect framing because they ignored the fact that, accidentally or not, Wanda did actually mind control for the space of about a month an entire town's worth of people. And yet, even though both myself and people like Mahler, Critical Drinker, Gary from Neurotic, and so on, will freely admit that that was poor framing on the part of WandaVision. For some reason, the MCU doesn't get any credit for trying to fix it in the second movie, or in the movie that immediately followed that show, which I don't get. Because to me, that seems like them realizing their mistake and then framing Wanda's actions as villainously as they should, while still simultaneously allowing her to be a three-dimensional character. Which I'm fine with. That's why, for all of the many faults of Multiverse of Madness, being as it didn't go far enough into any of its material as it should have, the fact that it retconned WandaVision's ending is actually a virtue because WandaVision's ending was one of the worst parts of the show. Moving on, though. Banana. Unless you had anything to add to that.
No, I think, again, this is like kind of your thing, to be honest.
I'm curious what your reaction is going to be when he talks about how he would have written it, because how he would have written it is very, very dumb, and was actually the main reason I wanted to cover this, because I wanted your opinion as someone who does brainstorm better options for stories a lot as to how stupid he's being. Anyway, Banana.
So, in Doctor Strange The Multiverse of Madness Art of book, one of the sequel's producers, Richie Palmer, shared a compelling justification for Wanda's apparent descent into villainy. WandaVision was a crazy journey for that character, he begins. So to see where she would go after.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. I'm not.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not really going to critique his way of speaking because that's inconsequential to this, honestly.
Yeah, he's British.
No, not that. The sarcasm.
The sarcasm in and of itself doesn't bother me. It's the stuff he's sarcastic about that bugs me. Because, like, I will agree in this particular moment with him that the producer is being very stupid for not actually elucidating that Wanda was a villain all along in the events of Westview, and that the ending of WandaVision was not properly framed, and that's the biggest problem with it. Again, in a sane world, she would have been treated like the walking nuke / monster that she is. It would be something similar to how Everett Ross, or not Everett Ross, Thunderbolt Ross treats the Hulk. But instead of having Monica react to Wanda in the sense of, I'm sorry you lost all that, Wanda, but you still mind controlled an entire town for 3 weeks, so we're going to have to bring you in, and then have Wanda fly off. That would have been proper framing. But instead, what happened was Monica basically hand-waved away the fact that Wanda had mind controlled an entire town by accident for 3 weeks, and actually gave her sympathy in the sense of they'll never know what you sacrificed for them. I would say that part of the story was the wrong part, and that her then relapsing into further guilt because of the dark corruptive influence of the Darkhold, which is a corruptive influence similar to the Death Note or the One Ring, is not the problem. Especially when you consider that in the comics, and at least heavily implied in the movie, her powers come from the same demon that wrote the Darkhold in the first frickin' place. So she would be even more susceptible to it regardless. But banana.
That. It might naturally be a darker place.
No, not really.
Not really.
Not really.
The whole arc
of WandaVision was that she would come to terms with it and let it all go.
Wasn't it? That was the whole arc.
That was the whole arc.
So she might not be in the happiest.
So she might not be the happiest person in the world after that show. And we see how the most powerful being in the universe did.
Okay. Hold on. I do want to let him finish his point. They just stopped mid-sentence. So.
Okay.
Sorry. And still, it's disingenuous of us if we stopping in mid-sentence.
Banana.
Deals with the question of happiness.
Really?
Really?
Is that really what we're justification?
Is that really what we're justification? Is that what we're doing? Is it?
Okay.
Doesn't really make sense.
Stop it.
I mean, come on now.
Stop. Because here's the thing. Both the producer that he's responding to here and he are both being very stupid. Because, no, the events of WandaVision don't necessarily lead to her going to a darker place. However, neither does it mean that the arc of WandaVision was her letting things go. What happened there, and I will go over it again for those that are a bit slow on the uptake, is she was in a grief-stricken, traumatized place. She had a psychotic episode. That psychotic episode was amplified by her existing magic. Then, she got just enough closure to momentarily let go of her husband and her children. However, she then became acquainted with a source of spiritual and literal darkness that is specifically tailored to her because the demon that wrote it is the same demon from which she gets her powers in the first frickin' place. I am willing to allow that he doesn't know that the Scarlet Witch gets most of her powers from either Mephisto or Chthon, depending on the continuity. However, what I will not allow him to forget is that the Darkhold, even in WandaVision, is considered the Book of the Damned and has a corruptive influence over its reader. So, sure, you could have done a version of WandaVision where she actually had the time and space to let go of her, her attachment to her husband and children and became a better person. However, that doesn't change the fact that that's not what they did do, because what they did do involved her getting the Darkhold and then being corrupted by it for 18 months. Moreover, the version of the story we did get was a very poor version of that arc, if that was the arc they were going for, because Wanda was never called on all the villainous shit she did in just WandaVision. So take out the fact that she did eventually do more villainous things later on. Take that out of the equation. One thing that I will agree with the people who disliked WandaVision on, because I mostly disliked WandaVision too, mostly because of the ending. But the one thing that I will agree with the Garys and the Critical Drinkers and the Nerdrotics on is Wanda was a villain in WandaVision. And she was never called on her villainous behavior because instead of reacting to Wanda like Thunderbolt Ross reacts to the Hulk, Monica let her off the hook, and it was framed as though she was in the right for grieving in that way. That should not have been the case. What should have happened is Wanda should have had her emotional moment with the kids and Vision and so forth. And then she runs into Monica, and instead of they'll never know what you sacrificed for them, go on, get out of here, you crazy kid, which is basically what happened in WandaVision as we have it. What should have happened is Monica going, I'm sorry, Wanda, I know what you've lost, but you still mind controlled a town and warped reality for 3 weeks, you crazy bitch. So we're going to have to hunt you. That would have been the correct way of that ending. But regardless of whether you agree with the way WandaVision was framed or not, I don't, but semantics. Irrespective of that, the fact that she wielded the Darkhold thereafter is a corruptive influence, which, given that she was already in a vulnerable state because of the grief, which she just barely got closure for, a negative influence, like a devil whispering in your ear in the form of the Darkhold, is enough to cause a relapse. Which, again, I'm going to liken it to a drug addiction or otherwise grief counseling. If you are a drug addict or someone going through severe grief, one of the things that will always get brought up to you in grief counseling or drug counseling, depending, is do not put yourself in a situation where you will be exposed to the things that make you spiral, dwell on the thing you just dealt with, or the things that will make you relapse. That is the crux of what happens at the end of WandaVision. She has just enough closure, just enough self-awareness to let go of her magically enhanced delusion and let go of her husband and kids. However, then she gets exposed to a negative modifier, to a negative influence. The kind of influence that, if this were in a real world context of like grief counseling or drug counseling, would be seen as a trigger for relapses. Hence why Wanda goes from seemingly alright at the end of WandaVision to full tilt villain by the time of Multiverse Madness, especially when you consider that she was alone in that cabin for 18 months, because according to the MCU's timeline, there are 18 months between WandaVision and Multiverse Madness, and not only was she alone in that cabin, which in and of itself, isolation is not healthy, but she was isolated with a negative influence, in this case, the Darkhold. It'd be like if you sent someone to drug counseling, and then the first day they were out of drug counseling, when they just admitted they had a problem, their drug dealer showed up and was like, hey, you want to hit? Moving on. Banana.
Is the video echoing? Because Denzel said it was echoing. I'm not really sure how to fix it. If it is,
it's not that bad. It's not that noticeable. It is echoing, but it's not a big deal.
Either I'd have to mute myself, but I think my own mic is picking it up.
That might be the case, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try and mute myself right now and see how it works for 20 seconds. Tell me if there's any happening.
Okay. Banana.
The show itself has essentially ironed that part out, because that was the arc of the show. It kind of undoes a lot of those things in the show, basically, which is not smart. Now, he says this, it's kind of a theme of our movie. Doctor Strange is also dealing with the same thing. You've said...
It did help, Brainstormer. It probably is your mic picking up on the echo. But and again, addressing his actual point. The thing that appears to have gone over your head, Mr. H, and even put you in the minority among the people that you usually hang with, like scary, critical drinker, and erotic, is one, irrespective of what WandaVision wanted to be, irrespective of what the arc of the show wanted to be, the arc of the show was not properly framed because instead of having Wanda held accountable for her mostly unintentional, I will grant you, but villainous actions, she was let off the hook. But even irrespective of the arc of WandaVision, what is being depicted at the end of WandaVision with her reading the Darkhold is her having just come off of her first step of grief. Again, to analogize it in more mundane terms, she just got done with her first Drug Addicts Anonymous meeting, and then her drug dealer showed up, which mapped back onto the show is she did have just enough closure, just enough self-awareness to let go of Billy, Tommy, and Vision. But then she sat in a room, isolated for 18 months, according to the MCU's timeline, with the Darkhold, which is basically a corruptive influence along the lines of the One Ring, or the Death Note, or the Necronomicon Ex Mortis. Hence, both because that's not a good idea for anyone to do, and because if you know the comics, you know that the Scarlet Witch's powers actually come from Chthon, and she is the avatar of Chthon in the same way Moon Knight is the avatar of Khonshu, or Juggernaut is the avatar of Sidorak. She is particularly susceptible to the corruption of the Darkhold. A, because she's the avatar of Chthon who wrote it, and B, because she's just coming off of a fresh bit of grief. And as anyone who's ever attended grief counseling or drug counseling or addiction counseling can tell you, the first thing you have to do is admit that you have a problem. That is what she did at the end of WandaVision. She admitted she had a problem, and she fought her way out of her delusions. However, the important bit is step 2. Don't then expose yourself to the thing that makes you relapse, which is what she did. She exposed herself to something that was inevitably going to make her relapse. That's not a bad character arc, actually. In fact, it's something that I wish more movies and shows would do, because so many movies and shows treat character arcs like they're a one and done switch thing of like, oh, I went through this character arc, time to flip the switch. Nothing related to that character arc will ever happen or reoccur to me again. And no, that's not how that works. Again, think of really good storytelling like Zuko's arc in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yes, he often goes through the same character arc multiple times. The arc of I should value more about my life than finding the Avatar and or my honor. But just because someone goes through that character arc one time doesn't mean it won't creep back up in their character at some point. Because big life-changing character arcs like that are hard to get off of permanently. They're inevitably going to relapse occasionally. Moving on. Banana.
Yeah, one second. I mean,
Yep.
Saved the world, you've sacrificed for the greater good, but are you happy? You know what? I was thinking this the other day, actually. It's almost as if Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness needed to come out before WandaVision, right? And, she's on this mad desire for children. So then that's when she learns of someone.
See, no, this is the single stupidest thing he says. And this is exactly, like, as soon as I got to this part in the video, I was like, okay, we are definitely responding to this, because I got to this part in the video, and I screamed, no, you idiot, that wouldn't make any fucking sense. And then I immediately thought of you and how you like to rewrite things, and I was just like, I can't imagine what Brainstorm would be saying to this right now.
well, I think I made my opinions known very much so on Phase 4. given how it
Mm-hmm.
kind of was a clusterfuck. Let's be fully honest on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have anything to say to this per se, simply because what's the best way I can say it? Well, one, he's just starting his Indian, right? And I am technically, I mean, it's taking me time because there's a lot to it, but I am rewriting Multiverse Madness. Granted,
Mhm.
my decision was to cut out Wanda and have more focused on of Madness part, like the
Mhm.
mini angled ones and stuff like that. So I kind of technically don't have a leg to stand on in this. I do disagree. I agree with you, Don. I disagree with Mr. H here that it shouldn't have come out before WandaVision, because WandaVision actually set up a lot of the Scarlet Witch mythos that would be carried on and expanded on in the Multiverse of Madness movie. So it's more of a continuation of WandaVision than a precursor to it.
Yeah, and here's the problem that I spotted here. If you somehow manage to have Multiverse of Madness or some version of Multiverse of Madness come out before WandaVision, it would actually make less sense. Because, again, the arc that we have is she has a mental breakdown, her powers actualize that mental breakdown in the form of reality warping and mind control. Then she gets just enough momentary closure to take the first step in grief. And that is all she did. That's the equivalent of her going to the AA meeting or the DA meeting for the first time. And then she was exposed to a toxic MacGuffin. In real world terms, this would be her drug dealer showing back up. But in Marvel mystical cosmic terms, it's the Darkhold. She's exposed to a negative influence that makes her relapse. Not to mention that there is something, and as much as I think Michael Waldron's writing was the worst part of Multiverse of Madness and is 90% of the reason why it's so hated, there is actually something somewhat intelligent in the way they handle her focuses in WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness. Because in WandaVision, her main focus is Vision. She wants Vision back, and her grief and the mental breakdown and her chaos magic actualize that desire. And then the children come up as a natural result of her having a happy ending with Vision, because a happy ending to her includes kids. However, in the end of WandaVision, her main bit of closure, the main thing she has closure over, is letting herself let go of Vision, which is important when you consider, and I even think I heard people drawing attention to this in the course of Multiverse of Madness. She only mentioned Vision twice. Once when she's chastising Strange for giving over the Time Stone in Infinity War, and once when she is justifying her grief, as she's about to nuke Kamar-Taj. Most of her grief in Multiverse of Madness is actually focused on the loss of her children, because and this is my point. I'm building up to my point. The reason I point that out is her different locus of attention signifies the fact that in WandaVision she actually did get closure of her desire to have Vision back. However, she didn't have closure about her children. Hence why, in Multiverse of Madness, she focuses less on Vision because she already had some closure over that, and more on the children because she did not have closure over that. She never got to finish being a mother, as it were. Like, the kids never went away to college or whatever the fuck. Which would have made sense in her, diluted but amplified by magic sitcom trope mindset. That probably would have been how that storyline would have ended had Agatha and the other denizens of the real world not tried to pull her out of it early. She never got to finish being a mother, but she did get to say goodbye to Vision. So, in Multiverse of Madness, most of her grief is actually not centered on Vision any longer, because that was the part that got closure. But she didn't get closure over finishing being a mother, hence why the Darkhold cued on that and kept showing her in her dreams. In every other universe, you have these children who you didn't get to say proper goodbyes to. Therefore, let's kidnap America Chavez, and her power can bring you to them. It's probably the only intelligent thing that happened in Multiverse of Madness, showing that her grief and pain had changed focus from losing Vision to never finishing being with her children. But it is at least a smart thing that happened on the periphery of the writing of Multiverse of Madness. Anyway, Banana.
Alright, meeting.
All right.
One from an alternate world that has them, and then she wants to do this with the Darkhold, etc., etc., etc. And then she fabricates the world of Westview, and then comes to terms with it. That's almost a more compelling arc, quite frankly. That seems to make more sense to me. Obviously, you'd have
no, because she has no reason. She has no reason to want children unless WandaVision happens. Because again, the main reason why Westview exists is because she was grieving the loss of the life she could have had with Vision. And frankly, in that life she could have had with Vision, the fact that she wanted kids was mostly tertiary to that. The only reason she has the kids to fixate on is because WandaVision happens first. She got to know these kids. She got to act in the role of the mother. She saw how they reflected not just Vision, but her. And that's where the maternal bond kicked in. If she didn't have WandaVision first, she never would have had the kids to focus on in the first place. Because unlike someone like Black Widow, who actually did, as of Age of Ultron, have a desire to be a mother, that was never the focus for Wanda as a character. The focus for Wanda as a character was belonging, which then translated into romantic belonging with and to Vision. And then the kids came as a result of that rather than a main goal in and of themselves. Which again, the main reason she focuses on the kids in Multiverse of Madness is related to A, the toxic influence of the Darkhold, and B, her unresolved feelings of grief and being cheated by existence. At first, her focus was, I wanted to have the happy life with Vision that I always imagined. Then, the events of WandaVision allowed her to feel at least some level of closure with Vision, hence why she doesn't focus on him heavily in the events of Multiverse Madness. However, in the course of her happy life with Vision, because she wanted to be a good wife and him to be a good husband, they did have kids. She got to know and like the kids, and it was the kids that she didn't get closure with. She got plenty of closure with Vision at the end of WandaVision. She did not get any closure really with the kids. Hence why the Darkhold was able to seize on that desire that desire to finish out the storyline, basically, because remember, Wanda thinks in terms of sitcoms on a subconscious level. That was like the main thrust of the logic of WandaVision, was sitcoms were a formative fixture in her life and in her happiness. Therefore, when her mind had a breakdown, her magic turned everything into a sitcom, because that's her security blanket. But in Wanda's sitcom-informed mind, in order for her to have a happy ending with her kids, she has to finish being a mother. Darkhold seizes on that, tortures her with dreams of them every night for 18 months, as she gets drawn deeper and deeper into the Darkhold's magic, and then she goes nuts and decides, I'm going to take America's powers and I'm going to use them to use my children. Moving on. Mm-hmm. Banana.
To iron out a little bit, remove some bits and pieces here and there. But that actually makes a lot more sense.
No.
Rather than what they did here.
No, it doesn't. Not at all.
He says this, you sacrifice for the greater good, but are you happy? This is something that all of the characters really have to confront, and that question takes them to crazy places. Wanda sees America as a chance to go find happiness out in the multiverse, and she's the Scarlet Witch.
Okay. I will agree with Mr. H here that this is the producer being very, very stupid, because frankly, while the "Are you happy?" question is certainly a question in Multiverse of Madness, it is far from the only one or the most relevant one here. What's more relevant here to both Strange and Wanda is the idea of relapsing along a character arc. In the case of Strange, the first Doctor Strange movie, as with any good Doctor Strange movie, focused on his arrogance, his selfishness, his focus on himself, and how that limited him and prevented him from being the person he could be. However, just because he experienced that arc once does not mean that he still doesn't have the arrogance to deal with, in the same way as Tony Stark, because Tony Stark had a very similar character progression throughout the first 3 phases of the MCU. Yes, he learned to be less arrogant in Iron Man 1. Yes, he continuously learned that throughout Age of Ultron and then Civil War. However, he did have to keep learning it in new and very different ways to eventually get to the point where he was okay with sacrificing himself in Infinity War, because that was how his arrogance got transferred from his mundane life as a weapons dealer to his life as a superhero. Yes, he learned that arrogance is bad, but that didn't stop him from acting arrogantly and from treating superheroics in a similar way he treated arms dealership. Strange is very much the same way. Yes, he learned that arrogance is bad and that self-sacrifice is good. However, because he still has that character arc, he needs to learn to not treat superheroics as an excuse to indulge in that same kind of thinking. In his case, his desire to make dispassionate calculus decisions regarding people's lives. It was one of the main reasons why he was bad at being a doctor, and it also reoccurs in his sorcery / superheroics life. And Wanda is very much the same way. She went through a character arc, but then she had negative influences that caused her to relapse. And that's also why the parallels between Strange and Wanda throughout Multiverse of Madness are to show Strange, okay, you want to play dispassionate calculus of the multiverse decisions, Doctor Strange? Let's put those justifications in the mouth of someone who is very clearly deranged and have her spout them back to you so that you can then hear, oh my god, that's how I sound. Because the arc for Doctor Strange similar to the arc for Tony Stark, is going to be not just learning once that arrogance is bad, but how to actually forego it. And moreover, honestly, the best way I can explain this is his calculus-based decision-making is wrong, and better is the standard of someone like Captain America. In Infinity War, he says, we don't trade lives. That's Strange's biggest problem. He likes being able to dispassionately trade people's lives for the greater good. But that level of greater good thinking in the mind of a villain, like a Darkhold corrupted Wanda, is a very, very bad thing. And in fact, it's a very, very bad thing regardless. And Strange needs to learn to treat people not as numbers in some grand equation, but as people worth saving. Moving on. Banana. Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be hard to stop her from getting what she wants. Yeah. Now, this article says, while it's easy enough to understand why some fans didn't like this creative decision, Palmer pointed to the comics when it comes to where Marvel Studios took its inspiration from the arc. Well, yeah, but it's only in...
He's about to poo-poo the comics, and I will reserve my rage for when he actually does it, because I am going to go on a rant when he starts poo-pooing the comics, but we will wait until he actually does it before I rant. Banana.
Inspiration. At the end of the day, we're all fans of the comics. No, a lot of people aren't, actually. And in the comics, the Scarlet Witch, for various reasons, doesn't always do things that are good for everyone around her. She kills people in the comics. She rewrites reality to her whims. And we always said, this character is, in our universe, we should really be honoring what she...
Okay, Mr. H. I have seen many of your videos over the years. I have agreed with many of your videos over the years. And one of the things that you constantly say whenever someone decides to not take the source material seriously or take the source material into account when they're adapting stuff is that you're being disrespectful not only to the people who like the material, but also to the material itself. So if you are going to sit there and go, well, a lot of people don't like the comics, then you, sir, have lost every leg you had to stand on when it comes to criticizing people for disrespecting the source material. Either the source material matters, in which case you cannot poo-poo someone for deferring to the source material, or the source material doesn't matter, in which case we, I guess, don't have as much of a leg to stand on when it comes to bitching at people for getting obvious things about the source material wrong. For all the stupid things that this person says, the article you're responding to, that was not a stupid thing. Yes, Wanda is a villain in the comics. Yes, she does kill people in the comics. Yes, she is very often psychologically unstable for the reason of one or more mystical variations, be it the influence of Catan directly, Mephisto, or the Darkhold itself. This is a standard character arc for Wanda, and you can't poo-poo that fact by going, well, a lot of people aren't fans of the source material. Fuck you. As you have said on many an occasion, your first and foremost priority when adapting a piece of source material is making something that the original fans can enjoy, and then whatever qualities that the original fans did enjoy will probably translate on some level to the normies. That was a true thing that you have said in various ways on multiple occasions. So I'm not going to let you off the hook in this one instance. Either the source material matters and matters always, or it doesn't matter, therefore I I guess we don't have any legs to stand on when they change shit. Moving on. Banana.
Yeah, one second.
She did in the comics because we think it'll be fun. We think people will want to see it. So the justification is reasons, basically.
Okay.
There you go. The justification, folks, is reasons.
Okay. Stop it. Okay. Mr. E. Or sorry, Mr. H. Getting my YouTubers confused. Mr. H. You should damn well know this particular justification, because I remember a couple months ago when an article was released that was an interview with one of the writers at Marvel saying we actually avoid showing people the source material when we make creative decisions. You were one of the people that bitched at them, rightfully so. I would add that disrespecting your source material and therefore the fans of said source material is the first and foremost mistake you make when you adapt something badly. So, no, you can't just write it off as, well, the justification is reasons. No. For all the stupid shit that the producer that you're in the article you're reacting to said, and she did say some stupid things, saying that it was in the comics and we wanted people who were fans of the comics to have that to hang their hats on is not a because reasons moment. That is actually, for once, Marvel doing the smart thing and admitting, oh hey wait, we probably shouldn't disrespect the source material. So which is it? Were you mad at the guy who said Marvel should go out of their way to avoid the source material whenever possible? Because I remember a segment where you reacted to that article and you were pissed off, as well everyone else was pissed off. I was pissed off. We also did a reaction to that article because it was wrong. It is wrong to take an IP in name only and shit all over the source material and the fans of said source material. And it's even more wrong to think you're smarter than the source material. But that being the case, you don't get to then lampshade this as, well, because reasons. No, this is actually the producer being responsible and going, well, this was in the source material. People like the source material, so we should probably try to replicate something from the source material. That's a sane supposition, sir. And I don't know where you get off assuming it's insane, especially because you're one of the people who complains when IPs disrespect their own source material or the fans of said source material. Correctly so, I would add. Moving on. Banana.
Smart. Now they say this, while it looked like she died beneath Wundagore Mountain, we expect the Scarlet Witch will return. Probably. Just undoing everything as always. But yeah, this is meh reasons for Scarlet Witch's turn.
Okay, some of the producers' reasons were not good ones. I will give you that. Like the hyper focusing on the "Are You Happy" arc instead of the Strange and Wanda's arcs mirroring each other in the case of relapsing their character arcs and taking on darkness to achieve their ends, and that whole thing. Like some of her reasons were stupid, but that last one, that it was in the source material and we wanted to please fans of the source material, so we did something adjacent to the source material, is not a because reasons moment. That is a, hey, they have some. That's like the Robin Williams genie meme. That's right, he can be taught. That's what that is. That's the studio actually acknowledging. hey, we have fans and they like the source material, so we probably should at least try to connect the adaptation with the source material somehow. That's not a because reasons, that's a because fandom. And given how very often the studios go out of their way to piss all over the fandom, we probably should encourage any time they remember, oh hey, we have fans to please and source material to adapt. Fuck you, sir. Moving on. Banana.
Well, did it in the comics, so you know. I actually, having voiced it out loud, I actually prefer the arc of Multiverse of Madness to then WandaVision. Obviously, remove some bits and pieces. I think that would be a great turn of events. That'd be brilliant.
I've already explained why that doesn't and wouldn't work and doesn't make any internal logical sense. So no, either you failed to explain why that would be a preferable state of affairs, or going off of the way you explained it here, your reasoning is wrong and therefore you are incorrect. However, be that as it may, I'm actually more pissed off with you at this particular moment for treating it happened in the comics and would please the fans as if that's not an entirely sane justification. Because I remember just not even a week ago when the One Piece adaptation came out, and the main selling point of the cast, and it was the correct selling point, I will get, I'm not disagreeing with the idea that adaptation should attempt to adapt their source material. I'm saying that you can't agree with the One Piece adaptation adapting the source material correctly and then treating we were trying to adapt the source material and please the fans as though that's not a good justification. That's exactly that. Not only is that a good justification, that's exactly what we've screamed and begged them for every time they've done something stupid ever since this. Like, that's been the main complaint was, how dare you disrespect the fans? How dare you disrespect the source material? How dare you spite your own fan base? Shit.
Okay. So somewhat playing devil's advocate. Somewhat. In a way, I can understand, given not everything in the comics is a good idea to adapt.
I mean, sure.
But
okay.
I think his reason for it, which is obviously, I don't think that's where he was going with it. I don't think that's what he meant when he said that, obviously. The characterization, granted, I've not read much of Scarlet Witch in the Marvel comics. I am aware of a few things, but regardless, I feel her arc was handled rather well, if a bit rushed.
The only problem with her arc, and I will stress this point until the cows come home, is that WandaVision didn't frame it properly, and Multiverse of Madness actually was trying to course correct it, because
that's fair. That's fair.
Everyone. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, it's just like, okay, pseudo rewrite here, I guess. Maybe instead of setting up Kang just yet, maybe, like, I think you and I have had the same conversation before, though, of like, maybe focus on the supernatural after you've done the so the Infinity Saga, like the supernatural stuff, like Midnight Suns and things like that.
Yeah, they were actually originally going to do something called the Eternity Saga, which was going to focus primarily on the cosmic entity Eternity, and therefore was also going to tie in the other gods and supernatural entities. That was the original plan for Phase 4, back when James Gunn was still going to handle the Marvel Cosmic side of things. But between his Me Tooing over the jokes on Twitter and the COVID delays, they decided to go with multiverse instead. I still think that was a stupid idea, because what you could have and should have done is Infinity Saga, Eternity Saga, then Multiverse Saga. But they didn't bother. But back to what I was saying with Mr. H though. Sure, maybe some ideas in the comics wouldn't work in the movies, or wouldn't be appealing in the movies or whatever. But like I said, given that a sizable portion of the arguments we have with the studios is the fans want something, usually just to have the source material respected, the studios go out of their way to call the fans toxic fans for wanting that, and then they go out of their way to shit all over the source material. Given how often that happens, I don't think it's reasonable to treat it happened in the comics and we wanted to please our fans as though it's not exactly what we've been saying all this time, and as though it's not exactly the kind of stuff that we encourage in literally every other instance this has happened, like Alita Battle Angel, the One Piece adaptation, the Sonic the Hedgehog adaptation when they decided to push it back and fix it to make it more in line with what the fans want after the first trailer bombed horribly. Like, that is typically the kind of thing that we encourage, and it's also the kind of thing we get mad at when they don't do, or when they go out of their way not to do. So treating it happened in the comics and we wanted to please our fan base as though it's not a good thing, and as though it's a irrelevant because reasons thing, is just silly, disingenuous, and stupid, frankly. Because in every other context, you would be praising the sentiment it happened in the source material and we wanted to please our fan base. So what's the difference here? Other than you didn't like the way the writing worked, which I guess fine, but as I just went over, your proposed rewrite of have Multiverse of Madness happen first and then have WandaVision happen second wouldn't make any goddamn sense. And the way it works, apart from the way WandaVision ended, which was ended wrong, is perfectly sensible, because it's the story of a character who is vulnerable and grieving, starting on the journey to closure, taking the first step to closure, and being sidetracked by a negative influence. If Wanda were a drug addict, it would be a drug dealer. If Wanda were in actual grief counseling, it would probably be PTSD or memories of what she lost. In the supernatural context of the MCU, though, it's the negative One Ring-like influence of the Darkhold, which was written by a dark god who gave Wanda her powers.
Repeat yourself.
Yeah, I know.
Hold on.
But anyway, let's finish this up. Banana.
Basically goes on a rampage for Multiverse of Madness because of loss of vision and children, etc., etc. You know, wanting children, learning about someone from a multiverse, and then going into WandaVision, sort of a bit more of a low-key one. So she just fabricates it instead. Goes through the same kind of arc, fabricates it. And
okay, here's a actual practical reason why that wouldn't work, apart from all the external justifications and thematic justifications and shite. The Wanda prior to WandaVision does not have anything like enough power to go through a rampage throughout the multiverse. Because, for those that don't remember, prior to the events of Multiverse of Madness and getting the Darkhold, Wanda's powers were basically limited to quasi-telekinesis and occasional mind control. She didn't have the reality-bending chaos magic, and that was something she learned about through her experiences with the Darkhold. So either way, you'd have to find some way of her getting the Darkhold, learning about the further extent of her powers, and then somehow doing the rampage. Because she couldn't have rampaged with the power she had in Age of Ultron or Civil War or Infinity War or Endgame. She had to figure out that she had chaos magic, and the way that she figured out that she had chaos magic was by being so grief-stricken that she went momentarily insane, and her delusions were amplified by it, which is the events of WandaVision.
Honestly, I think you said it better than I would have. Just because I completely forgot about that power boost you got at the end of WandaVision.
Well,
not that I forgot, but I just
yeah,
it just completely split my mind on that.
Yeah, one of the biggest, like, again, practical problems with his idea of let's have WandaVision happen after Multiverse Madness is, one, it completely changes the moral framework of both things, because one of the reasons why WandaVision coming first makes more sense and is more satisfying is because Wanda actually does what she does to Westview by accident. If she did it after the events of Multiverse of Madness, she would have had to do it deliberately. But yes, on a more practical level, she simply didn't have the power to do what she did until she was at her literal breaking point. And I guess you could move some stuff around and get her to that accidental discovering I have chaos magic and then being tutored by Agatha breaking point to the beginning of Multiverse of Madness. But Multiverse of Madness was already 2.5 hours. So I guess if you wanted to, you could add Agatha to Multiverse of Madness and have Agatha basically be kind of a human incarnation of the Darkhold, basically puppeteering Wanda from the sidelines and being the devil on her shoulder.
Also, wait, hold on. Also, didn't Agatha, she was the one that had the Darkhold first.
Yes.
So,
because her coven protected it in Salem in the 1690s. She went above her station and started reading the Darkhold before she was ready or knew how to control it, and it corrupted her. She ended up killing and absorbing the magic of her coven, and then spending the next 300 years, to quote her, taking power from the undeserving, basically going around to other magic users who didn't know how to use their powers and sucking them dry. And then she sensed the afterglow of all of Wanda's spells in WandaVision going up all at once, went, how the fuck could anyone possibly do that? When investigating, found Wanda in her deluded semi-conscious state, tried to wake her up by making the delusions fall more, realizing that Wanda didn't know what she was doing, and basically, by going through her backstory, figured out that she was the Scarlet Witch. Yeah. But I guess there is a way you could maybe do Multiverse of Madness before. It still wouldn't make any more sense than what we have. The best way of tweaking WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness and leaving as much of it alone as possible is simply have the end of WandaVision framed properly, so that instead of letting Wanda off the hooks spontaneously like Monica did, she would treat Wanda like the fugitive that she is, and then Wanda flies away, gets the Darkhold, and goes on a very obvious villain arc in between the events of WandaVision and Multiverse Madness. Because I guess his main complaint is that the villain arc for Wanda wasn't telegraphed well enough, even though it was already established that the Darkhold was corruptive and that it was the Book of the Damned, and that she at least had a big freaking role in it because the prophecy of the Scarlet Witch was actually in the freaking Darkhold. But I digress. Maybe I'm biased because I do know this particular section of the comics really, really well, and I do kind of know the lore they're referencing when they brought up things like Athan. But it's not like Wanda just barely takes the first step of grieving and then gets drawn back into darkness is that complicated. Or that not telegraphed. Especially when you consider that most of our community's like anti-SJW complaints about WandaVision were she was a villain the whole time and she wasn't treated enough like one. I don't know if Mr. E has just been, or Mr. H has just been on the fringes of that this whole time, or not. But
yeah. I don't mean to cut you off. But...
yeah, but I'm repeating. Anyway, Banana, and let's move on to the positive thing for this week.
And then learns to come to terms with it. That's much better. Anyway, Marvel producers not understanding stuff, color me surprised.
They might not, but you, sir, don't understand it either. Like, this isn't one person being smart and the other person being an idiot. This is two idiots arguing past each other, and me having to come in and correct you both, pretty much. Moving on.
Sorry, I was setting it up.
Yeah, I know.
So kind of to give build up to this. And Dom, that is also keep you not to spoil it like you always do. Yeah. So this is in reference to something a teaser trailer that came out this week. That is an adaptation of a book series that I myself, well, I wouldn't say I am a big fan of. I certainly grew up reading. I actually got the box sent 1 year for my birthday. So, those. Good. So without further ado, the official teaser trailer for Percy Jackson and the Olympians.
I must say, Percy Jackson was never a franchise I expressly got into. I will, however.
Don't. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I can kind of guess why. Just simply on the fact the age difference. Those books were kind of for the age I was at the time.
I mean, that might have been the reason, but I do remember seeing them in the Scholastic Book Fair catalog back when those were a thing. But and the reason I'm hesitant to agree with you there is because the first guy I had a crush on, I remember he really liked those. Granted, he only ever mentioned them once, as far as I was aware, but he did say he really liked those. So I don't know if it's an age thing or if it's a just I was less interested in the idea of demigods than I was in the idea of like wizards and so forth. although I will say, my first exposure to this was the movie adaptation.
Those
And
are not the books. I will put. I just want to point that out.
I hear that they're bad adaptations, but from what I saw of the movie, I didn't really like the way they portrayed demigods either. I don't know how similar the book's way of treating demigods is to the way the movie treated them, but I didn't. It seemed like it was a very forced, we need to find some way of turning demigods into misfits instead of Chads thing. And I'm sorry, but if you have to mangle the lore of a mystical species to make it fit, pick a different one. Because in you can almost get away with the Hercules style, they're too strong for their own good and they wind up hurting people, and that alienates them. But this whole reading Greek gives them just, reading English instead of Greek gives them dyslexia thing, and that whole thing, like there is no way to do demigods that would satisfy me that doesn't turn demigods into insta-chads, basically, unfortunately.
Why you guys shit on everything now?
I'm sorry, but folklore and mythology and shit is my area of expertise, and there's something that always rubbed me the wrong way about we have to turn demigods into misfits, not by having people be alienated by their awesomeness, but by turning them somehow into a stand-in for like neurodivergence or disability or something. Like the way you do, in my opinion, the way you do a demigod not fitting in story is they're too strong and too epic for their own good, and it ends up hurting people. That's the way you should do it.
I want to punch you so fucking bad.
I know. And when we meet in real life, you are free to hit me as many times as you like. But it will not be today.
Alright. Let me mute real quick.
I agree, Dragon Turtle. But again, demigods is probably the wrong type of character to do it with. For example, X-Men are better at this because
maybe it's because I read those books when I was young. But I kind of disagree because I don't think I don't know, man. It's been a while since I've read the books. I will admit that. But I'm a fan of them, and you fuckers are not ruining it for me.
I appreciate your fandom. However, I'm sorry.
No, you're not. Don't
even if they wanted to be subtle about it, turning my brain is wired for Greek and therefore in English I have dyslexia into a thing is way too heavy-handed disability representation. And I'm saying that as a disabled dude. Like, don't turn the Chads of the mythological realm into cripples just because power fantasy is all I'm saying. Demigods are insta-Chads by their very nature, and trying to frame them as something else is just silly.
Fuck you. Also, should we change it? Like,
Ambrosia?
yeah, that's my mind was automatically going there.
Yeah, I was planning on going Ambrosia.
Okay. All right. Neat.
My name is Percy Jackson. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. Bad grades, bullies, all the normal stuff. And then there's some stuff that's maybe not so normal. There.
I can't even say I'm sorry because but this is one of those things. Honestly, if putting my rewriting hat on for a second,
I want to.
and I know this would be an extremely hard sell for a book series that's targeted at youth, because we've all gone to the Stephen King school of hating on bully characters. But honestly, if you wanted to do this demigod as troubled kid thing, you should make the demigod the bully. Because let me finish. Because if in a modern context, if a demigod did come from like a troubled family, I could see a demigod taking out their frustration for their home life on other people. The problem is, in order to make that work, you would have to sell the normie like school reading demographic on a traumatic bully protagonist. So I understand kind of why they didn't do it, but it would make more sense given that demigod is your starting point.
Okay, so yeah, Rachel, they had movies, but those were terrible adaptations. Apparently, from what I remember hearing about the creator, Rick Riordan, is helping with this. Or
I did hear that, yes.
Yeah. I wouldn't say this is a series, not a movie.
Yeah, they turned it into a show.
Yeah.
Or they are turning it into a show, I should say.
Honestly, again, there are some book series I think would work best as a series, more so than a movie, just because. Yeah, it really depends on the book, you know.
I assume they're doing one season per book, unless I'm
okay. With the main Percy Jackson series, that's 5 books, so 5 seasons, which is pretty standard usually. And there are the spin-offs that are there. So.
Didn't they do one that focused on the Egyptian pantheon? I remember in one of the Scholastic book fair like catalogs, it was from the same guy that did Percy Jackson, and it was Egyptian based.
Okay. So also getting on back on track. Yes, I believe so. By the way, I like how this all looks, and I can probably be more respectful to the source material, given that the characters in the books are actually like 13, 14 years old, like starting their teens.
Mm-hmm.
Though
they probably aged them up so they didn't have to deal with as many child actors, to be fair.
You say that, but I've seen a lot, like especially in recent decades.
No, they're good child actors. I'm just saying that, like, it's a game of roulette whether you find a good child actor or not.
Fair enough. But I also like how it's a weirdness because obviously this takes place. I'm assuming the color grading, even if this is essentially the human world, the mortal world, is kind of saturated, kind of less than half full, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
And then the magic stuff looks brighter.
I think it's God damn it. That's all. It's supposed to be following the book. Granted, again, adaptations are going to have to be made given certain elements of the books might not work on live action, or just don't fit with format of the episode. But
I assume they'll at least try to keep the. I assume they'll try to keep it to like one story arc for like one book per season of content. I would imagine, but
yeah. Jeez, fucking Christ. Sorry, my fucking throat is killing me. But I still, even if it is technically desaturated, it still has these flashes of color.
It still looks colorful enough that it's not dour.
Yeah. Also, it looks cinematic. I know I throw that word out there a lot, but a lot of TV shows, especially stuff I've seen like in terms of Disney Plus stuff, it has very flat lighting.
Well, I imagine that they paid a pretty penny to A, get the rights from whoever made the movies, and B, get the rights to all the books so that they could adapt them all. So they probably are putting in effort just because this cost us a fuck ton of money, so we need to make sure we get enough money out of it.
Yeah. Oh, damn, my fucking throat. Anyway.
Ambrosia.
Yeah, one sec. Let me mute.
Get a glass of water or something, dude. You sound like you're dying.
I'm drinking water right now.
Well, mute and take a drink so that you don't have to talk. Because if you die on this stream right now, I will get the necromancy.
You saw something. Something that no one else could see. The stories that I have told you about great gods and half-bloods, they are real. Mrs. Jackson, things have changed. This is all developing a lot.
Okay, so I actually have two questions because one question just occurred to me, and the other question is relating to what we just learned about her telling him prior to him actually going. Did she actually teach him about mythology prior to him being sent off to Camp Half-Blood in the books?
My knowledge, no.
I was gonna say, because that didn't sound like something that would happen in one of those books, but honestly, I kind of like it because that is one thing I always hate about YA books like this. Of like everyone in the know is so cocksure about keeping the supernatural element away from the protagonist, and it's like, did no one ever think that maybe like stealthily like informing them on the subject matter would be useful at some point? The second question I had is honestly a more self-serving one. You've read the books, right?
Yeah.
So you probably saw this question coming, but is there a way in the Percy Jackson universe for mortals to learn to see shit, magically speaking, or moreover to use magic in general, or is it literally just a those of divine blood thing?
I don't think it's ever been talked about or covered. From what I understand, mist, which is what blinds mortals to all the supernatural stuff. I think there have been a few cases where some, like maybe one, it's like a rare case of some mortal not being able to see past it. But I'm
Okay,
not
so
sure.
there are mortal magic users that aren't of divine blood then.
I don't know if they're magic users or they're just immune to it somehow. Again, it's been a while since I've read it, and I don't think it was ever covered simply because that's not where the story was going.
I just wondered because there are straight up mortal magic users in Greek mythology. I just didn't know. It seems like the kind of thing that they would, if the like narrative MacGuffin is demigods, I could see a situation where they did like only those of divine blood could.
Well, I'm trying to give you an example. There is a girl in the later part of the series, like the main mythology, that becomes the successor to the Oracle of Delphi. And she's just an average person. She's just a regular girl that is a friend of Percy's. So, yeah, some demigods can use magic, depending on their heritage, I believe. I mean, they have certain abilities and attributes given their parentage, like Percy being the son of Poseidon.
Right. Yeah, I get that part. I'm not concerned with demigods being able to use magic. That part's obvious. What I obviously rather selfishly am concerned with is can vanilla mortals, can those without any divine blood worth speaking of,
that is
use
magic? For yourself. That is something you have to look up for yourself, man. I'm not too sure. Maybe. Again, there's not mention of it because I don't think it was like it never really became part of the story.
Okay, because like I know that's the case in the actual mythos, but I don't know how loosely or tightly the I know this guy's novels take liberties, so I didn't know if he made it like a only those of the special blood can do the special things kind of thing, or if it's a case of like divine magic is stronger, but people can use it anyway.
I will say this. They do depict Hades.
They depict what?
Hades. They depict him right. Not a villain or anything like that.
Oh, Hades.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
like Ares, I believe, is supposed to be the antagonist of the first book.
Like yeah, Ares is a bit of a dick, and Hades gets a bum rap in most things.
Yeah, really, he's just apathetic, really.
I don't know how I feel about him being apathetic, but it's better than him being the devil, like he so often is in things. So,
well, okay, how would you describe Hades? That's my question. From what I've understood, he does his job, and he's not.
I wouldn't. Go ahead.
I mean, he's not a serial cheater like Zeus. He's not. From what I understand, Poseidon. Again, I don't really look much into. I'll be honest, I don't really care about Greek mythology. I've heard it so much in my past that I prefer all the other mythologies because they're far more interesting and they aren't as well covered.
Of the big three, Hades is actually probably the most like stable and sane, and actually, in some ways, he's the most sympathetic of the three because like most of the myths that feature Hades and Persephone feature them basically being like people going to them to appeal for justice and somehow, some way, by hook or by crook, Hades and Persephone wind up being moved. Like whether it is Sisyphus pretending to have not been buried correctly, even though he asked his wife not to bury him correctly on purpose, and then getting punished for tricking him later. But
stone up the hill.
Yeah, the initial premise of the Sisyphus story, though, is that Hades is sympathetic enough to Sisyphus that the con could have worked. Same thing with Orpheus and Eurydice, Orpheus and Eurydice. He is moved both by the plight of Orpheus and Eurydice, but also by the music produced by Orpheus to allow him a chance at freedom, and so on and so forth. So yeah, Hades, obviously him being apathetic is better than him being the devil, but in terms of adaptation, but Hades is actually a fairly soulful character. In fact, I would make the argument that he gets the most raw deals of any of his brothers, because technically, by the rights of Greek tradition, since Hades is the oldest, he should be the one that inherits the heavens, because it's the most prized of all their parents' possessions. But because Zeus pulled the "well, I rescued you all" card,
holy shit! Lance Riddick is going to play Zeus in this.
Dang.
I feel like that's fitting, honestly. He's badass. Lance Riddick.
I mean, I don't know how deep the books go into just how much of a philandering piece of shit Zeus is, to be fair.
Well, to be fair, again, the stories would focus mostly on the demigods and stuff, which is a major thing. Didn't Sisyphus also lock death in a chest for a while?
I don't remember a story about him doing that to Thanatos, which is the one he probably would have done it to if he could do it, but that doesn't mean that that story doesn't exist. It's just not one I'm familiar with.
We are going on 3.5 hours here, so.
Yes, we need to make with the ambrosia rather quickly.
Faster than we anticipated.
Grover, why is there half a goat in your pants?
So the important thing is not to panic.
Percy Jackson, we've been expecting you. The Master Bolt.
Okay, maybe this is probably one of the things that the books did better than the movie. But question: why is the theft obviously the lightning is a super weapon in Greek myth and everything, but why is the theft of the bolt so significant when you consider that either the Hecatoncheires or Hephaestus, depending on the version of the story, could make him more?
I don't even remember. Like I said, it's been a long time since I've read.
So it's not something you know off the top of your head. That's fine.
Off the top of my head, and I'm sorry about that. Just I feel there is a reason. There is a reason it was stolen.
Okay, I can understand it's just a super weapon and we need it to not fall in the wrong hand. I can vibe with that reason. I'm just saying, in the movie, it made it seem like Zeus only had the one bolt, and that its theft was a big freaking deal in and of itself. And yeah, no, as someone who's familiar with the mythology, either the Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed ones, or Hephaestus are the ones in charge of making him bolts. So, like, it's not the case that he just has the one.
Okay, so the Master Bolt is the source of Zeus's lightning bolt, right? The thing, and he blames Poseidon. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, it's the petty bickering of two brothers, basically.
Okay, so it's the Olympians doing Olympian things again. Okay, fine. That's fine. I just in the movie it made it seem like he only had the one lightning bolt, and it was like considering that the Hecatoncheires or Hephaestus made you that, they could just probably make you another one. Obviously, the super weapon going missing is a little bit like someone stealing a nuke, but in and of itself, it's not like you're prevented from making more lightning because the bolt is gone. At least not in the original mythology. Again, I don't know how loosely or firmly.
I mean, it's a little. It is. They make it a little more childish, obviously, because it is a young.
Because YA novel, but yeah.
Yeah. So they don't go into the more seedier aspects of Greek mythology. More or less.
Because Zeus would not be a protagonist if they actually went into the actual detail.
But how do they? It's also the thing of how do they do it? What else can they do? But now armed with a super weapon. Yeah. They do actually. From my understanding. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what happened, but now my throat is scratchy. Son of a bitch.
I'm feeling kind of better now. So.
If I were a more paranoid person, I would be trying to convince myself that you somehow passed it to me. But considering distance is a thing, I don't think that's the case.
It's a natural thing.
It's one hell of a coincidence, though. Anyway, Ambrosia.
I think I did want to say I like the look of Can't Have Blood. Like it's very. I like the look of everything. It's just so. Like obviously we're getting more color and stuff. It's more vibrant. But
it looks a lot more like fan art I've seen. I have seen some Percy Jackson fan art, and it does look a lot more like the fan art that I've seen.
I'm feeling that they build a lot of the sets, which is good because it should be more tactile. It should feel like you're in the space with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. I get it. I will always. What's the word? I've always want more practical things over CGI. Granted, again, CGI to help.
The best use of both is to blend them with each other rather than overusing one or the other.
Yeah. But also, it does seem like everyone here is like the actors and stuff. You know, like not seeing a lot of people talk. Like all the actors here are like giving it their all for this, or at least greatly doing a good job acting. The best I could say.
Ambrosia.
Has been stolen. That is your quest.
Remember what I taught you? You're gonna need to be brave now.
Okay, so I'm kind of hesitant to say this, but I'm not saying it's as trippy looking, but certain shots, I definitely get a cinematography, an American God kind of feel.
Yeah, they are definitely like they're doing a good job blending the mythological with the like mundane modern setting.
Yeah. Again, I'm not saying like the trippiness or as creative as some shots of American Gods are.
It kind of feels like American Gods for middle schoolers a little bit.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, no, that's probably a good aesthetic to go with something like this. Although now I'm just imagining a young Shadow Moon at Camp Half-Blood, because he's technically the son of Odin and the reincarnation of Thor in American Gods.
Balder, not Thor. Never, because he's shining and stuff, and Balder's supposed to be like the shining one.
Well, in the in the show, it was definitely supposed to be Thor.
Huh.
Granted, the show got worse as it went along.
Okay. Yeah, it's like around 10 seconds.
So Ambrosia.
What happens to mixed God race kids or quarter blood? Giant Turtle asked, what happens to mixed God race kids or quarter blood?
That I don't know about in the Percy Jackson mythos.
I've never heard of those type of. To be honest, from what I understand, not many demigods get to live long, like super long or happy lives.
Because they die quickly. They beat the fuck out of each other.
As far as I'm aware, there aren't many that live. Well, no, there are. To my knowledge, okay. Again, it's been a long time, and I haven't really delved into those as I probably should have. But I haven't. Yeah.
I mean,
like supposed to be like heroes of Greek myth, and I mean Greek myth heroes. Their tales never end happy.
Yeah, Hercules died horribly because Hera finally got sick of Zeus fucking around, both literally and figuratively, and made it her mission to screw with him. Achilles' death was basically his own fucking fault. Because he was a dick. Perseus, I believe, lived fairly long and managed to found a city. I don't remember which city he founded off the top of my head, but I think Perseus and Theseus ended fairly well.
That's actually his full name, Perseus Jackson.
Which why the hell I know I'm not the first person to make this joke, but why the hell is the son of Poseidon named after the son of Zeus? But oh well. But anyway, it's probably not a show I will watch. I will be interested to see what fans of the franchise think of it. It looks good regardless. I never got into this franchise, and I'm not about to start now. But I guess that's the point at which we should probably do outros.
I also want to say that it's supposed to come out December 20th, so it's set for a Christmas sort of release date.
Mm-hmm.
Which I find interesting, because honestly, it feels like something you'd see released in like the summer or at least fall, rather than winter.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's just me.
I mean, it seems lighthearted-ish, so having a Christmas release wouldn't be a stupid idea.
I mean, I agree. It's just, it has that kind of, what's my understanding?
A literal
has that
summer camp vibe.
That and like the adventurous feel, which is also associated with like blockbusters in the summer. So,
But if they're trying to trend it more like wholesome and family friendly, then yeah, it could work for winter.
fair. Although I think one book does take place in winter at one point. So, anyway, with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avidazai, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Next time you see us, it will be October. Until then, fuck off.